see what I'm getting at.
Yeah, and that goes back to taste, which isn't it like that's how like and that's like just expression, which is how I would personally view gender. Like when I said before, I gave that example where like like somebody who plays soccer, right? That just it just feels right to them. That's like I would say the word taste, right? That fits their
Mhm.
taste. And so like again, that's the same thing with like however someone wants to express themselves in any which way, it just kind of fits their taste. And your taste is based on genetic factors, biological factors, sociological factors, psychology, and it's also
Yeah,
based on just previous experiences, right, and things like that.
exactly, that's what I was gonna say,
You
yeah.
know, and so like I like the word taste, and actually because like Nietzsche uses it in like a really really pretentious way, but like I do a lot of things do just come down to taste, like even if you kind of um, project it out of just like the food realm, right? Like not talking about just food, but just like whatever your taste in video games is, or whatever your taste in
Mhm.
art is, or whatever your taste in how you want to express yourself, or how you want to dress, or how you want to be, right? Like just it's up to taste, right? And then I guess if I use the word taste, that's a lot more a common word as well, and it's also a very much
Yeah,
so thing that people understand that like, oh well, people have different tastes, right? Like who cares,
I think that's a good way
whatever.
of putting it, yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
Um,
I have a good question.
Hello, this is my after thoughts for after the conversation. I need a better intro for this. This conversation was good for me, and I think good for Puffshake, where we both talked about things that are in our head, and we kind of maybe solidified ideas. However, I don't think I took good enough notes. I don't think I structured this actually well enough to be a good conversation to listen to. I don't. I'm not trying to insult myself or Puffshake at all. That's just kind of how I feel. Because I felt like I brought too much of Judith Butler into it. I brought too much of the harder philosophy into it when I feel like I should have focused much more on what Puffshake was doing. And so a lot of my questions had to relate a little bit to Butler, and we kind of spent too much time talking about that. And I don't think that was right. Maybe I'm wrong. Please, if you think so, comment down below. As always, if you want to talk to me about anything, message me on any social media. Talk about this, talk about gender, sexuality. Most things are on the table. All right, let's get into the actual conversation. So I guess we'll start off with introduction. I don't know.
Yeah, sure. So, I can just introduce myself if
Yeah, I'm
if that's
talking
what
to
works.
Puff
Yeah.
Shake. Do you want to you
Yes.
want to say anything else?
Yeah, so on Puffshake, I do political Twitch streams over on puffshake.com, uh, which is, redirects you to a Twitch site. I'm not like hosting my own stream or anything like that.
Right.
Um, and yeah, I just do daily political streams where I talk to chat and watch, political content and talk about it. And I like to think I know what I'm talking about some of the time.
You do a good job.
Thanks. So that's me.
Yeah, I guess for this conversation though, I remember you saying something. Oh, I guess I'm debate Tiger Joe. You talked to me about stuff and things.
Yeah, yeah,
And so I
yeah.
remember you saying you possibly read up a little bit more or something about either gender identity or performativity. And I can say that word better now, but after reading it enough times,
Yeah, you have to yeah, it helps, like, the repetition really helps.
uh, I agree.
Um, yeah, I did a little bit of reading, and then I sort of analyzed, that video we were discussing from Philosophy Tube a little bit
Right.
more, and then mainly it's just been sort of practicing talking about it, like, to people.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
'Cause I feel like you learn best when you're explaining things to other people.
Yeah. I guess. I guess for this introduction, it'd be more so. I put down. I wrote a bunch of stuff, which is I briefly went through kind of Judith Butler's work and things like that, and it seems to me that
Mhm,
when she wrote Gender Trouble, and then she wrote other things like something on the account of, but there was like other books like 5 and 10 years later. That book came out. Gender Trouble came out in like 1990 or something like that.
mhm,
She kind of switched around her position, not like contradictorily, but she did like evolve it in criticism to possible political and ethical concerns raised about her idea of gender as a performance or performativity.
mhm.
And so, oh, so I'm not so like this conversation is not going to be some strict actual philosophical discussion of Judith Butler's theory, if that's what we want to call it, but more so whatever the heck Puffshake wants to believe in, because that's what I think is important here. So I'm not
Yeah.
like I've read a bunch of stuff. I'm like, oh man, I don't agree with that when Judith Butler said something. So like I wrote a bunch of stuff that half of it might be me just like criticizing Butler directly, and so like you don't necessarily have to answer to those things, but I'm probably going to bring them up anyways because they might be interesting or something.
Sure, fair enough. Yeah,
Hmm.
I mean, yeah, I do my best to not carbon copy my positions off of other philosophers, but I think I do tend to agree with her on most things. So maybe I'll be able to defend some of her positions, and then maybe I will not want to.
Yeah.
Alternatively,
Hmm. And oh, and like you said earlier, it's really useful talking about things. So at the end of the day, it's like hopefully both of us or whoever listens will get a better idea about gender identity or performativity or something like that.
for sure.
So I asked you this last time, but we'll begin off with is whatever, like, what is gender performativity, or whatever kind of thing you want to describe it as.
Okay, so more or less, performativity, as I understand it, is a term referring to the process of um, well, not so much even the process. I guess it's just sort of a term referring to the idea um, that people act out their chosen genders in society, and that's the primary way that our society determines what people's genders are functionally.
Okay.
So an example of that would be if you have decided that you're a man and that your sort of social function in society is that of a man, um, you're probably going to do your best to sort of um, act as though you are one. As simple as that sounds.
Or like act like a man as the society would classify it.
Right, the societally demonstrated examples that you've grown up around.
As society reinforces or tells you to perform. Oh,
Yeah, and it would probably be like a given society, like a given like a local society, right? Like your idea of what a man is might be marginally different, like in Seattle compared to the deep South, or I don't know. That's an important distinction as well.
mhm. Yeah, I totally agree. This is interesting to me. So one of the first things I had a problem with when I was reading up on Butler was, do you think a subject exists? The person doing the performing?
Yeah, this is the part of Butler's argument that I don't ever feel like I understood fully is
Okay.
the argument about the subject. I've always been a little
Oh,
bit unclear on that
I
when I
am.
studied in college.
Yeah, I will not get into it, but briefly, if anybody cares, it's a very it comes from different ideas from like Freud and Nietzsche, and I think some Foucault of different ideas of like how society like has different. It's really difficult because I'm not like well versed in all these terms, and I don't want to use them either. It's basically like there is no subject, as in, i.e., if I am acting like a man, there is no me there. That all of the performances that I am doing are actually just societal performances, if that makes sense. Like I am just replicating and reproducing something that does not actually have a original copy. It's something called a simulacrum or something like that, where
Oh, okay.
that word means like a reproduction of something that does not have an original copy. So like if I am per se acting as a heterosexual man, I am just performing and slash like reproducing and doing repetitious actions as like societally, but I'm not actually doing anything. There is no like independent me. Like there is no subject actually doing it that we would consider like would be gender. I like that sounds confusing, right? And it's not. I don't like talking about it. I
Yeah, I
don't.
think I kinda get what you're getting at.
Yeah.
Would, like, the TLDR be, like, that the subject is sort of a conduit through which society is represented?
Um.
Is that
Yeah.
accurate
Like
or am I
yeah, and like and then Butler would say like that doesn't exist, or at least she did say that at one point. I think she might have changed her mind at some point as well.
Yeah.
Um. So yeah. Okay. And then we'll look. What is our goal with this conversation?
Um, I guess the goal here this time would be to maybe dispel, some contradictions or some counter arguments that have been posed, um, against the idea of gender performativity, right?
Also word. Oh, it's one L. Okay. Oh, I can't spell anything today. Okay.
That's okay.
Oh no, I'm gonna like
That's what
misspell
spell check
things.
is for.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Um. Right. GP gender performativity. And so I guess my goal. Oh, you're bold too. My goal is like I kind of want to focus on the ethics part of it or the political action of it. I think I probably said this last time too, where I'm less concerned, or I guess like me poking holes in anything that you might say would be me concerning how we actually like get these people freedoms or like how we like become a better society. And so like if gender performativity doesn't do that, or does that in a way that fails it, like for instance, civil rights people have tried to push LGBT rights for a long time, and they have quote unquote failed, like, but they haven't actually reached their goal yet. So if I see something that is similar to that, where like if gender performativity has the same faults as previous theories put forth that like maybe tried in like the 70s or the 60s, I'll basically like, I don't like that, I want to throw that out because I don't think that's the way we're actually going to like solve and fix society like moving forward.
Right. So your idea of a strategy which is worth discussing is one that would work in our current society, you're saying.
Yeah, I'm like much more I don't want to say the word utilitarian, and because I'm not a
It's okay, we can
utilitarian.
skirt around it.
Yeah, but no, it is more like I have a goal, and like that goal is based on like actually virtues and stuff like that, and other things. I think I said, what do I really care about? I care about being like humanist, secular, total love in everybody, and so
Right.
yeah, and so like at the end of the day, it's just like whatever gets people there in those terms is for me, because I don't really care about the truth at the end of the day. I'm not
Yeah.
where like if you go read Butler, who has like read a lot of like Foucault or Derrida or Laplace and things like that.
And I need to read Derrida. I never
They're
did.
yeah, it's fun, but like that stuff is very very intellectual and very very could be considered like ivory tower. It's very inaccessible. Like it's the
Yeah.
language in it is very dense and um like historical, not like historical, but like you could literally read like one sentence and then like three terms could come up and you'd be like, what the hell does that term come from?
It's so true,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so like that's
The
I
tough
don't I
part
don't
is
like
that,
that.
like,
Right.
we can, like, credit these people for having, like, ingenuitive or original philosophical ideas, right? But they're not always gonna be good writers. Like, that's
Yeah.
that's the, tough catch-22
And I
about reading
always
philosophy.
I always go back like how many of these philosophers actually, because like like I don't know, Donald Trump got elected president. So like how many of these philosophers actually affected political change at the end of the day or something like that. So like, it's one of those things where things can sound really good on paper, but you also need to have some kind of like empirical or pragmatic type thing where like you put it into action and then you see what happens. And this would kind of be the mixing of like science and philosophy in a type of way where I think you need to do both.
Mhm.
And
Fair
so
enough.
um, how do we plan to get there? So like I said, your goal also dispel counter arguments against gender performativity. How do we plan to get there? Oh, well, this question doesn't make any sense now. That's okay. I put that there in case. We'll get
Still
it out
works.
there. Yeah. Oh, I can
Mhm.
strike through. Is it just Control C? Nice. All right. This is professional. Okay. So,
That's nice shit right there.
I guess okay. So Judith Butler, I had a real problem with this. I read Judith Butler said gender is not an internal reality, and I had a real problem with that. Do you know what that means?
Yeah, we actually went over this. Well, I don't know that I can explain what it means, but we did go over it in my gender philosophy class that I took a few months ago. So yeah, we spent like a whole like hour where even like my professor was pretty confused about like what she meant there, and I feel like it's kind of a point of contention in her writing.
I think it
Which is
relates
all to
back
say
to
that
the
I don't
subject.
have like a good answer for that.
Yeah. I have to assume
Sorry,
it
go ahead.
relates back. I have to assume it relates back to there being no subject, right? That like gender is not an internal reality; it is a reproduction of actual actions. So um, it's not like how you think, I guess, or how you feel. It is what you do and your being, or like in your becoming and like action, like your deeds, and not
Sure.
some kind of thing that you have or something like that.
Yeah, I think she wants to. I think she wants to highlight. I mean, this is just my conjecture, and I don't know for sure, but it seems like Butler wants to highlight the idea that that gender is taught from external sources as opposed to occurring spontaneously, naturally in somebody's conscience, I should say. Like for example, it probably like gender probably wouldn't form in the way that we understand it if somebody grew up in space, right? Like completely isolated.
Right. Mhm. Yeah, and like the problem that I still have with that is that like how I feel about gender would be more or less just an identity, like other kind of identities. And so even though that gender would be completely different, it's still just an identity at the end of the day.
Hmm.
And so I guess what I wrote, would a healthy kind of gender expression be there regardless of whether other people saw it?
So sort of like the if a tree falls in the forest, does it make a noise kind of
Yeah.
question.
So I mean,
Yeah, that's a good question. I haven't
like
really
that's
thought
one of those
about
things
that
where like
before.
performing. So like obviously this is one of those things where like when Butler says performativity, this is obviously like a philosophical term or something or whatever you want to say like that. So, but like the metaphor of performing is still there, right? So I feel like it has to be dealt with, especially if you're trying to talk about people who aren't necessarily going to ever read the source material or the text, right? You're going to have to deal with the fact that the word perform is there, and that's what people are going to most think of your like idea or theory or whatever. And so
Uh-huh.
like performing something is always done to be seen, as far as I can tell, right? Like it's an
Yeah.
act that is seen by somebody else or something else. And like to me, gender expression exists both in like society and being seen, but also internally as well. Where if a person was just completely alone, they would still have gender expression, in my opinion, at least, and also from the people that I've talked to and my own personal, I guess, anecdotal experience.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's kind of like a conversation. If it, I don't know if that's reductive to me for me to compare it to that, but I think it's sort of like interpersonal conversation. Like I don't necessarily know if your gender matters if there's nobody there to acknowledge it, and I don't know if you can reflect your gender identity to anybody if they aren't around to see it. You know.
Mhm. Yeah, it was like I think this comes from like Hegelian dialectics with like master slave and things like that, and where like you're defining yourself in the other and stuff like that. Where
Hmm.
it's kind of like it's a negative reinforcement, or you kind of you define yourself in things that you are not and whatnot like that. Like you're necessarily excluding things and stuff like that. I mean, personally, I don't think that's how people are at the end of the day. Where it seems like what was that? I guess I'm gonna say the ContraPoints one where she said like women in jail and an all woman jail still want to put on makeup, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
why? Like that's odd. Like I guess you could say that like because that's the problem. Where like if you just say it's not like I could say it's a part of their identity, and therefore they want to do it. Like they want to perform that action. But if you're saying like you're not saying this, but like if you're saying like gender is not internal reality, it's like you're not performing for anybody. You're not performing for society. You're locked away in a prison. There's you are separated from society. Why are you putting on makeup in this place? Unless oh well, do you want to say something before
Yeah, I think in well, no, go sorry, go ahead.
I mean like the things where I don't know is maybe in that prison the other women judge each other based on their makeup still and has nothing to do with like sexual attractiveness at the end of the day.
I think
Um,
that's part of it. Yeah, I think
I
makeup
I don't know.
in particular largely registers as a learned social activity.
Right.
So it seems like people are going to want to do it, after forming. There's probably a better way to put this, but after like forming a makeup habit, like you're probably going to continue to do it
Mhm,
just based on the fact that you like how you look more when you wear it, right?
mhm. Uh,
So it's more of like an interpersonal thing than something like gender is, I would say.
write that down. So that kind of goes in my point right here where you said habit, and this is one of those things where it seems to me that is gender performativity actually giving a useful definition of gender. And one of those things is like, to me, it just seems like, am I kind of, superficially, am I just overcomplicating behavioral psych or overcomplicating just saying people are habitual, where it's just, if a person puts on a dress and other people tell them that they should put on a dress, this is just habit. This is just reinforced like behavioral psych, right? Like I see no, like I see no reason why to go past behavioral psych or something like that to gender performativity when I already have an answer before it and it's more complicated at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think the issue there, this is kind of a tough one, but I think the issue there arises from the fact that we can't quite reduce gender like that, or I would say that gender performativity is still useful to think about um, because it describes something that our sort of modern societal notions about gender doesn't, right? We find in a lot of cases, and this is the primary critique of, let's say, sort of traditional ideas about gender, um, that those definitions aren't inclusive enough to make sense, even most of the time in our sort of contemporary society.
Mhm. Would you
Um,
so you're saying, like, if gender performativity does describe things that, just saying, like
yeah, well,
anything like an
it
example, I
provides a
suppose?
thesis, like an explanational thesis, as to why people don't always adhere to these sort of more rigid binary identities.
Um, wait, how so?
Like, for example, if we talk about the category of man, and we say we can use it, the term man is useful, right? Because we can use it to describe how roughly 50% of the population behaves on a day-to-day basis, right? That's why most
Mm,
philosophers would agree the utility is in the term man. But it seems like more and more that term doesn't really describe the people that it's supposed to refer to, right?
yeah,
So when you're thinking of a term like man, you're thinking that person probably is capable of of like contributing zygotes in sexual reproduction, and b fulfills a whole series of sort of asexual roles, that have little to nothing to do with reproduction. So when somebody is a man but is infertile, then do they suddenly not fit the category? Or when they are fertile and have a penis but don't act like a man is supposed to act, then are they not a man? So like you run into a lot of issues with a term like that, and it seems like either the language needs to be updated, or we should just kind of look to gender performativity as a means by which we sort of work our way out of those outdated terms.
right. I guess so. Gender performativity is mostly about performing, and then repetitious action and things like that. And like, do you see how that's very similar to just saying behavioral psych, like where like people's behaviors just reinforce in their mind and things like that? And like behavioral psych has
Yeah.
things built into it for when people change as well. Like people don't always do the same things forever as well.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I agree with you on that
Yeah.
part, yeah.
It's like habit makes a person. And like, so this is where it comes down to more. And because I feel like we're both for, abolishing gender kind of as a concept, right? And
Yeah, I think
so
so.
relating it to like when you use, at least when you use a term like gender performativity, you still like have the word gender around, which like I guess maybe we could just like throw out the word gender and just say like but like you can't because you're saying like gender is performed, and like I'm more of the opinion that just is like I'm more of the opinion that gender is just another type of expression of self, and that gender has just been kind of like a false dichotomy, like falsely put onto people at the end of the day.
Mhm,
And like it's not really a thing like at all, like because like some people like to express themselves in the way that they dress based on things that I don't know if would be considered gender, like if they really liked music, like they like if they're like a metalhead or something, they might dress and express themselves that way, right? And to me, I don't see how that might relate to gender. It's like it's useful to like I would just kind of go back to if I wanted to talk about like the binary between like male and female, masculinity and femininity, I would just like go back to like feminist literature at the end of the day, which like Judith Butler is obviously feminist, but I would just go back not as specific as Judith Butler and just say like, oh, like these things come about probably because of oh well this is further down, but another large criticism that I actually saw with Butler that I also wrote myself before reading some stuff is that this kind of mm, gets rid of societal and historical effects where like I'll say for instance like women have certain roles and men have certain roles because of power, like like in like capitalistic
right.
society or like not even capitalistic society, it's just you know like in this country like women couldn't own property or women couldn't vote or something like that. And so like certain gender roles are placed on them for like power reasons, for like controlling and stuff like that. And so like gender performativity doesn't actually allow you to talk about like historical and material things like that at all. And that's one of the things that like she actually like couldn't do at all. She tried to do it with her theory and she didn't do it. But
Mhm.
like that doesn't mean like you can't do it at least.
Yeah, well, I guess I kind of get that. I guess I see how it might be inconsistent, but I don't see, like, practically speaking, how it would prevent you from speaking about, like, history in terms of gender, right? I think you could have a society which is largely, devoid of gender, of sort of necessitated, or I should say, societally necessitated. God, I can't speak right now. Societally necessitated um, gender performances.
Mm,
Um, I think you could do away with those and still manage to have a conversation about how people used to be, right? Like we don't like
mm,
sort of predicate our societies nowadays around things like serving a like a deity, or what's that called when somebody is supposed to be like the conduit of a deity, like a prophet or
sure.
an avatar. We don't like sort of organize our societies that way anymore, but we can still sort of talk about them and understand them, right? I don't know if that's a perfect comparison. It's just sort of off the top of my head.
Yeah, I guess I would say, if that makes sense, where I think, because I don't know if we're getting too specific into the actual theory of gender performativity. Because, for instance, if I say, if you take a religious outlook, and we'll just say like a Christian outlook, if I say like within Christianity, what are the tools that it gives me to help describe like the the slave trade that like happened between Europe, Africa, and the United States during 1600 to 1800 or whatever,
Hmm.
right? And it's like, okay, well, like religion would just be like stuff about God, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like it'd be like,
Yeah.
like these things are like evil sins, blah 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 blah, right? And it's like I would never actually get any good, actual like, because I need to look at that from like a economic standpoint, or from like a capitalist standpoint, or from a like a foreign policy standpoint. I'm like, I don't know the specific words for this, but like that makes sense, right? And we're so,
Yeah.
in terms of like gender performativity, it seems like,
Yeah,
oh, if I'm saying
definitely.
like gender is performed, well, like, can you force performances on people? Because it seems like a thing that's like unconscious and stuff that people are just doing because they don't want to do them, but just because it's kind of that's what gender is. I guess that's the confusing part, where it comes back to like gender is not an internal reality, and it's like really difficult to talk about it when you don't have a subject to talk about. Um,
Yeah, that's true.
I guess you probably
Um,
just say there's a subject, so we don't have to worry about that.
I guess I might. I'm not sure how I feel about whether or not there's a subject. Yeah, I get a little bit stuck on that one. Although I think we are skipping over maybe a
Mhm.
small sort of normative assumption in all this, which is sort of the assumption that words that the purpose of language and words is to serve utilitarian purposes, or to serve a utility, I should say. Because I feel like there's a debate to be had about that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I would say words. I mean, like words mean things. I don't know.
Yeah, there's sort of like a back and forth, I believe, in philosophy still, about like, oh, I can't remember the term for this. I'm gonna have to look it up.
Like locution or illocution or something like that.
I can't remember. Like,
It comes from the Latin word is like lucere, and that means like to talk, and that's like its derivative. I don't remember how to pronounce it though.
I have to think about
Sure.
like
So like,
I'm
are you
gonna say
talking?
this
I just like
right.
recently read this too about something where like, are you talking about weird stuff where trying to describe language in different ways? Because like Derrida did this a lot, I think. Because you can do stuff where there is speech that is just like speech, and then you're just talking, and then there's speech that is actually action, if that makes sense.
Oh, that's
Uh,
related to what I'm talking about, but it's
yeah,
I'm trying to think of like there's a debate about whether language is descriptive, like um if it arises out of societal necessity, or if it sort of naturally develops as a function of those things existing.
sure.
It's a really small discrepancy, and I'm getting kind of off in the weeds here. I
No, you're
realize
fine.
that.
I would say that you necessarily probably want to bring in like anthropology into that as well, not just like kind of like whatever is kind of philosophy as well, to actually look up the historical stuff, because you're going to be like going back like millions of years at the end of the day. Well, not millions of
Yeah,
years, but
sure.
whenever.
Um, but
Yeah,
what was your other question? I'm sorry, I got kind of distracted there.
yeah. You said, yeah, you went off and you said something about like words, like a normative claim involving words, and so I guess what I'm saying is, was that in relation to me like nitpicking over the word gender performativity, or no?
Um,
Like the word perform
I think
itself?
what you were sort of getting at earlier was that terms like male and female are useful because they serve a societal function, right? They describe a set of behaviors. Isn't that sort of something you touched on?
No, I did not.
Okay, I just misunderstood you. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
No, I don't. I mean, no, I don't think the terms like male or female in terms of what we might describe as gender are like useful at all. I think they're the same
Okay.
thing as like not like the same thing as race, but it's, for instance, there are like medically necessary things, right? Where you might want to tell
Hmm.
someone your sex, but there's a lot more to it than just your sex, right? It's a lot more than just saying you're male or female, or like the 2% of people who have like not just XY and XX chromosomes, right? Those
Right. Sure.
those things are very important for just like medical treatment, right? Like, and I don't
Yeah.
I don't see how those things are even remotely important, like societally at all. At the end of the day, right?
Yeah, I
And
agree.
so,
And even then, you can just sort of like you could have a doctor help you by telling them, which set of genitalia you have and
mhm,
how your chromosome will make up is composed.
right. Yeah, it's a weird thing too where, I guess it's not sidetracked, but, like, surgeons sometimes just, like, take it upon themselves when, like, uh, a baby is born and their kind of genitalia is called into play, where,
Mhm.
if they're it's like different hormones or something like that during, like, uh, developmental stages of, like, the fetus will, like, cause, like, genitalia to, like, some parts to grow into, like, whether, like, it might be male or female, like, sexual
Mhm.
anatomy.
Like an
Um,
intersex status.
yeah, and, like, these things don't overlap, right? There's, like, specific ones I can't remember or something like that. Just so like, oh, but it's like because we might have like surgeons and especially male surgeons are much more likely to just be like, oh, well, like this baby looks like a boy. So therefore I'm just going to maybe not even ask the parents, but just like do a surgery to make it more boy or something like that, like to like
Yeah, it's
remove that.
incredibly unethical. I hate
Yeah.
when I hear about that
Um,
stuff happening.
and like, and even if like that's like very rare, but like even like, sometimes the parents, because a lot of the times in those situations, the parents will like ask the doctor or the surgeon what they think. And like the surgeon's opinion in that case will always kind of affect the parents, right? So if you have a surgeon who still kind of has that biases, then their opinion is going to come from a place of authority and power, and it's going to kind of like comfort the parents, and they're more likely to go along with it as well.
For sure. Yeah, it doesn't seem indicative of consent necessarily.
Hmm. Um, I don't know. We'll move past this. I don't know what this.
But yeah, I'm sorry. I got a little bit confused about what you were asserting a little while back there. So
Oh,
it's
this.
fine.
Okay, so I guess I can repeat. Like, so, for me, it seems. Um, so for me, it seems odd. I guess I'll try and restate this one more time. Like how someone wants to present themselves, I feel like has much more to do with just like their identity, right? Like you take, you know, anybody, right? Like based on their looks or their preferences or the movie they or the music that they like or the movies that they like, right? Like the way they want to present themselves is just usually based on how they are as a person, and that's incredibly complicated. And there's a lot of stuff that go into it. And so I think that trying to just say that like gender is just at the end of the day just like behavioral and just how someone wants to be instead of like going back to saying it's performed is it seems like an overcomplication. Like it seems like it's overcomplicating things. And I also especially don't see how it's kind of useful. I think I wrote this down somewhere else, like useful down the
Okay.
line where
Yeah, I think I finally get what you're getting at.
yeah, like
Sorry.
if you're trying to explain it to somebody, right? And like you're trying to say like, oh, like gender is performed, and then I wrote this down earlier or later on, but then it's like I feel like here. Well, I mean, we can skip about this. Like, so, like I'll ask you this, or do you want to say something first?
I just feel like I finally get what you're getting at a little bit better. You're saying more or less uh, like, why not just talk about something more like, gender abolition since it's a little bit easier to describe,
Yeah.
why don't we just talk about getting rid of gender entirely
Mhm.
rather than talk about the fact that gender is performed? I see what you're getting
Yeah,
at.
like because like at the end of the day, when you want to talk to somebody or try and describe something to them, it's like you ask somebody like, "What does it mean to be a man?" It's like, "Oh, well, like I'm honorable or I'm strong." And it's like, "Well, can women not be honorable or strong?" And it's like, "Well, no." Like you like kind of go through the I don't know, you go through the different lines of thought or something. And like at the end of the day, it's like all of these qualities that we kind of apply just can apply to anybody, right? At the end of the day, any of these kind of virtues or things where, like there's a big problem with you know, because a lot of them are usually negative for women, but like some of the ones that are very negative for men have to do with toxic masculinity, but also like fatherhood. Where women are seen as just being naturally better mothers, and so that's like, well, hold on, like fathers can also be really good parents. And so,
Yeah, it's true.
at the end of the day, when you're trying to talk to people and try and convince this stuff, it seems kind of overcomplicating things being trying to bring in gender performativity when like it's just like, hey, like all of these things that we ascribe to people just like they don't matter, right? They're just made up. And then like and that's the thing where like you say like they're made up and then you have to come up maybe with reasons why they're made up and then you can say stuff like, oh well, because of the patriarchy and because of here, let me tell you 300 years of history of women being
Yeah, it takes a
enslaved,
lot
right?
of explaining. It's true.
Um, and then, because you want to explain that stuff because at the end of the day, I feel like trying to get them into gender performativity is like an overcomplication at the end of the day. Um,
Yeah, I think so. I think maybe I can agree with that. I would have to see how it, plays out in some, real life scenarios to really, iron down how
yeah.
this stuff actually works for people when they're trying to understand me. I mean, for me, it was illuminating, but I might have been on a different page than most people because of how I sort of entered, feminism,
Mhm.
which was from, a mostly academic perspective, and I was already pretty on board with the underlying assumptions anyway.
Right.
It might be kind of a lot to sort of throw at somebody to say, "Alright, the patriarchy exists,"
You just go
Women
hard.
are not like treated as equal in our society, and you have to learn that gender is only a performed action. Like that, yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. That is kind of a lot.
Yeah, I'm a big fan with that though, because where I mean, even that's the thing where like Bernie Sanders, in US of A, right? He just said the word socialism a lot, and it just
Yeah,
it works, right? It didn't even take that long, and now the
that's
term
true. Yeah,
socialism is just around. And so, like for instance, like whenever I talk to anybody, I'm always like, I'm anti-capitalist. I just say the word anti-capitalist a lot, just so like no one can get around the fact it's just like I think capitalism is bad, and I always want that to be on the table. It's just capitalism is bad. And I
yeah,
also
that's true.
the same reason why I say the word patriarchy, because like there's a lot of people who are like patriarchy and they like make jokes, and it's like no, it's like a very well researched school of feminist literature that is fine. Like it does its
Yeah,
role. And in the patriarchy, you also it's not just women who are kind of mistreated. It's also a lot of these things are a little bit like pyramid schemes, because at the end of these days, these are usually kind of power dynamics. And so
that's true.
like same with like white supremacy, like it's a pyramid scheme where like rich whites benefit way more than poor whites do, but like poor whites still like benefit more than we'll say like people of color.
Hmm.
Um,
I think that's like, I mean, I've told this people to the people before, but I think that's like the number one life hack when it comes to understanding sort of people's ideologies when they're talking about them. Just like look at who benefits from what they're talking about, and it's usually like a pretty good way to tell like um, whether that rhetoric is actually like good rhetoric or not. You know, if someone's like making a bunch of arguments that like sound nice, but then like, at the end of the day, the stuff they're talking about only benefits rich white men, you might
yeah,
think like, wow, that might actually not be like a useful argument
no,
after all.
yeah. Oh, I need to read it, but there's a book actually called White Trash, and it's a book that details how white supremacy has been used over the past like 400 years to keep poor whites like down and as like labor and stuff like that, and to like pit them against other things. I'm like, oh man, I really want to read that book so I can have those talking points to like talk to somebody, be like, no man, like because there is that famous quote of FDR or like JFK or something who says like, you know, if you convince someone to watch out for that black man like to robbing you, they'll be able to steal a wallet right out from under you or something like that. Do you know what I'm talking about? That's not the quote.
I think I've heard of that. Yeah,
Yeah,
sounds familiar.
that is not the quote. But it's like, like if you keep people scared in one direction, their attention's going to be on that direction, and they're not going to be worrying about other things. You can just rob them easier, right? So
Oh,
like if
right, sure.
yeah,
It's
like
almost like a magic trick, like misdirection.
yeah,
Yeah,
basically. And so like if you can convince white people or anybody of anything, right? If you can convince like men that feminists want to like take all your shit, then that will distract you from like your really terrible fucking wages and stuff like that, and the fact that you don't get vacation time, and the fact that like the United States is like way behind everybody else in terms of like actually having a healthy, happy population.
right, true.
And so and like those things are generally like I want to call them conspiracies, but they are like kind of overarching weird, not like Illuminati, but they're like like this is how the powerful stay powerful, and they do kind of feel like secret like tricks that the powerful are like pulling the wool over the eyes of like everybody else or something like that.
Yeah. Well, I think we're supposed to. I think that benefits them too. You know, I think
Hmm.
feeling weird or secretive about discussing something like that is just like a case in point that
Hmm.
that stuff that we're talking about actually does occur.
Yeah. Um, okay, I'm gonna so this is what interesting to me. So I'm not a fan of gender roles, right? Like I said before, I don't like the fact that like a woman is seen as a certain role, or like or anything, or like if you say, even if you're like super um progressive, and you're like, and like at the end of the day, if you say like there are gender roles, you're saying there are like a trans woman has a role, and I'm like, well, that's silly. Like whatever role a trans woman could play, I feel like anybody else should be able to play it, right? Like I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but I guess if you come up with an example that might contradict that, please do. But
I can't think of one.
yeah, and so it's like like a gender fluid person, or like a gender queer person, or like a man, or like so like it
Mhm.
seems to me like, does performing like gender performance still keep gender roles around? Do you think they
I
do?
think it's sort of antithetical to gender roles, right? Because it's saying that because the idea that we perform gender as it is outlined by society is sort of a what's that called? A sub not subjugation, it's a similar word.
Not subjugation,
Subversion, a
subversion.
subversion
Yeah, she does use the
of
word subversion a lot.
yeah, I like the word subversion.
Mhm.
But the idea that we perform gender as it's outlined by society is a subversion of the idea that gender roles exist, right? Because like if everybody has their own gender role as outlined by whatever criteria we've decided, um, outline gender, like your genitalia and your chromosomes, and or for some people, and then for other people, maybe like your what you're expected to do based on your family or whatever else. Right? If we see these things as something that you are just sort of acting out, it kind of lends power to the idea that maybe they aren't necessary.
Right.
Does that
Yeah.
make any sense?
Yeah, and like I do agree with that, I suppose, in a sense. But I guess like I guess I'll say this. And so, if I say we can perform something like that, so if I say the statement like you're not performing that gender role well, although that's not true. You're saying it's is it a subversion? This is the thing that I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to decide, and I'm honestly sort of just like, I could see how someone could easily disagree with what I'm saying, and probably create some strong conjecture, but
Yeah. No, she does.
I
She
don't know.
does like to liken those things, at least politically, as like subversive, because she talked a lot about how it is like power and stuff like that. We're like having this binary of like male, female, or masculine, feminine, or something like that. The
Mhm.
queer people, like whoever they may be, but like the just the non-binary people in that dichotomy are subverting power just by simply kind of existing. Which I have a problem
Yeah,
with that I'll bring up later. And I, g- I guess the problem that I have though is like very specifically if I say like the the gender role like it would there could there still be like a performing a gender role of being a mother or like being a caretaker? Does that make any sense? Or is that
um,
not fit?
I mean, I guess if you can identify, I think you can identify parts about the gender role of being female that have to do with motherhood, but I don't know if motherhood as a woman
All right.
is a gender role all on its own.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Or like if I say like so like for instance I say like okay so like being a woman or something like that might be a performance, right? You're like, performing this gender. Am I still allowed to be like can I still criticize people over this? Can I say like, can I still have ideas of how a woman should perform, or how a lesbian woman, like well, lesbian woman, like a gay woman, should perform? Like, does that still allow that criticism to exist inside of gender performativity?
I think if you have notions about after you read, okay, if you're
Mhm.
somebody and you read about gender performativity and you still think after that that people still ought to perform gender a certain way based on X criteria or Y criteria, um, then you have to sort of justify why they ought to do that, right? The burden of proof is now on you to sort of justify why people
Yeah.
ought to
Okay. Yeah.
perform those gender roles.
So I agree. So like for instance, when it says like oh like lesbians, they're butch, right? They're kind of like men. They're tomboyish, right? That's like and that's false, right? And so like if I'm just like
Mhm.
okay, so like when this lesbian is performing her gender, why is she not acting butch? Like I agree with you, gender is performed, but like why is this lesbian? She should be performing it as butch. And like do you see how like to me it seems to just move the goalpost where like if I'm some we'll say like that's not sexist, is that genderist? I have no idea what like but that's like some kind of bigotry or
Yeah,
stereotypical
I guess
thought.
I'm just a
So
bigot,
like
yeah.
I don't know what I have, but like for whatever reason, my upbringing made me to believe that lesbians should look a certain way, and then you convinced me that gender is performed, and now I'm just like, okay, I agree, gender is performed. I still think like a lesbian should be performing gender in a certain way because of my already previous biases.
Okay, to which I would say, like, fair enough, but why? Like, now you have to demonstrate why lesbians ought to,
Yeah, but you
act a
already had
certain
to.
way.
But did I feel like you already had to do that in the first place, and I feel like just adding in gender performativity is again like the overcomplicating bit, if that
Oh,
makes
I see
sense.
what you're saying, it just adds another step.
Yeah, because you have to deal with their biases at the root, and you still have to do that after
Yeah, I still think that's a fair objection. I think if I had to make one argument for gender performativity
like useful.
as something that yeah, as something that's useful, I would probably say that you can kind of liken it to a tool, right? And let's say that gender is an engine, and the engine's old and kind of rusty and fucked up, and you want to sort of dissect it, and and gender performativity is sort of your wrench uh, which allows you to sort of pull that engine apart, right? Or your toolbox.
Right.
So it doesn't necessarily fix the engine for you, but it
Mhm.
does allow you to sort of lay out all the parts and look at them and be like, okay, well, these parts aren't necessary. I don't need to keep these parts in my engine. And then let's replace these old parts and fit them with new parts. Update
Mhm.
them a little bit.
Yeah.
That makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, it does. I guess the issue that I have is that for me to have good arguments against that, for instance, is I would much rather use like historical context, so I can do this for like gay men better. Where so like being gay, at least in the United States, I guess in our history, I don't know around the world, but being gay is kind of being seen as being effeminate, right? It's kind of seen as not as a man, right?
Yeah, at least
And
a lot of conservatives would think of you as less of a man. Yeah,
right,
that's a
exactly. And
pretty
so
common way of thinking about gay men.
there was this like backlash or like there's a philosophical term called like resentment, but I don't want to use the term resentment, but it's like backlash might be a better word. And so it's like so a lot of gay men started acting super hyper masculine, right? Like so they were like, oh, okay, they're going to criticize us and call us effeminate, so we're going to like be really super buff dudes, right? And like so therefore they can never call us effeminate, right? This wasn't
Right.
everybody, right? But this was like some people, right? I think I was watching something about. Do you know the Village People, the song YMCA?
Oh, you mean like the classic YMCA song?
Yeah,
I didn't know it was by the Village People, but yeah, I'm familiar with
yeah.
it.
So like the Village People might be an example of that, where they're like very much so not like they're very much so like masculine. They're like cops, right? And like a cop, a construction worker, and other like very stereotypically like manly things. And so like the problem with this though is that like this is still just like another stereotype, right? Like at the end of the day, gay people don't have to be buff, right? They're just gay, right?
Yeah,
They can't be. And so like so like in gender performativity, I can't talk about this. But just knowing like historical facts, I can talk about this. So I can say like, like if someone asks me like, oh, like where do my biases come from? Like I don't know how you solve that with gender performativity. And if someone asks me like, where do my biases come from? I can be like, oh, like let me talk historically about some things about gayness and how people were persecuted and things like this, and same with blah blah blah. And like these thoughts came from possibly like religious or other types of overtones. And like you just don't do that like but gender performativity just like you can't really there's no like historical aspect to it at all. There's no um like social or like institutional, like there's no like talking about institutional powers at play, I believe.
yeah. Well, I guess what we end up with there, I mean, I think I sort of agree with you in most cases. Although I have an objection I want to bring up in a second, but
Yeah,
I think the sort of outcome of what you're saying, which I agree with, is that gender performativity isn't a perfect tool, right? It's not always going to help you solve every situation, especially when it comes to sort of historical situations, because it hasn't been around that long as a concept. Um, yeah, so it's just not always going to be like the perfect tool to use.
yeah, okay. I wrote this was from I read a somebody criticizing Judith Butler as no, I guess preparation for this. I just read some stuff. I'm a weird guy. I
Mhm.
enjoy
Oh,
doing
that's
this.
okay.
um,
I can tell. I mean, that's a good thing.
yeah. Uh,
Your viewers will appreciate when they can tell you're enjoying what you're doing.
I have viewers. Do I have viewers? I don't have
You probably
viewers.
do. I think you had like
Nah,
two or three when I checked.
crazy. No, I'm good. The key is to upload things to YouTube and just try and catch people that
Dude, I
way. Yeah.
really need to do that. Yeah, I think I
Um,
subscribed to you on YouTube today. Did I do that?
I have no idea.
I think I
I
did.
have
I will after this if I didn't.
I have actually a couple ideas of kind of clickbaity titles that will hopefully lead to things. And so
Nice.
anyways, yeah.
That's what really matters.
Um, so one of the things I wrote, I guess I thought this was important to Maria, is that the implication is that gender is not the expression of an abiding substance, but a naturalized social ritual of heterosexuality masquerading as an expression of natural sex. This was like this.
Can you read that for me one more time? Sorry, I have like ADHD or something.
You're fine. This was like so. I don't know why I thought this was important, but I guess I'll go through it maybe.
Hmm.
So this person wrote, the implication is that gender is not the expression of an abiding substance, but a naturalized social ritual of heterosexuality masquerading as an expression of natural sex.
Okay, I think
Um,
that's true
so like I think like the
for the
idea
most
behind
part.
this is like I guess in gender performativity, it's like I think the main idea, right, is that we have kind of two sexes, right? That's not the entire truth, right? There are in between stuff, but like it is fair to say like in general we have two sexes, right?
Yeah,
That's
medically speaking, we typically
yeah,
have to. Yeah.
which is also kind of I feel like that is the biggest hurdle if you're trying to convince someone of any of these things, is that at the end of the day they're probably just always going to go back to like, well, people are just men and women, right? Like at the end of the day, there are like, like 98% of people or something. I have no idea, but it's the vast majority of people are just like that. Their sex is that, right? And then people unnaturally, or unnaturally, yeah, I'd say like unnaturally, as in like socially or whatever, put
Right.
value judgments on people based on their sex. And then the reason why they do that though is for other reasons that again I would probably say gender performativity does not go into. I don't think there's anything here. I
Yeah.
just wrote that. I just
And probably for like naturalistic reasons, I think is an important
yeah.
caveat, right? Like humans historically needed to do that because like
Mm.
reproduction used to be like the most important facet of day to day life.
Yeah.
Even
I,
though I don't think that holds up anymore.
no, I don't think that holds up like in the past like 6,000 years or whatever or something like that. Like as soon
You
as
put it back
people
that far?
yeah,
I never
well
thought about it this far.
6,000 years is like generally considered the I feel like that's the first time that like we had like we would consider like real civilization as like a lot of
Hmm.
people getting together and like farming was fine and stuff like that. Um
I guess it's fair, yeah. And I guess you have to. I mean, you also have to account for like cultural relativism, right? You have to,
yeah.
understand that some cultures are going to be more predicated on
Mhm.
reproduction than
There's
others are going to be, depending on
there's
their level of development. But
yeah, there's such weird stuff too when you look kind of historically, which is one of the reasons why I'd rather put things in like historical perspectives because my goal, at least in this channel and stuff like that, it would be to get people to research stuff like at the end of the day, which it's kind of difficult for people to do. And so like talking about these things, like for instance, Sparta.
like the Greek city
Yeah.
state,
Yes. Yeah,
yeah,
like Spartans. Yeah. So Sparta, the women in Sparta, widowers especially, had immense power. Okay.
yeah. I
It-
remember reading about this,
yeah.
but go ahead. Sorry.
So one of the reasons why, and I'm pretty sure I'm getting this correct, but I could be remembering it wrong, um, is that Spartan women they just inherited the wealth from their husbands or something like that when they died, and then wealth was passed down. Um, like I think, and then so like, and then wealth was just passed down to children, and then since Spartans, Spartans had all of the men enlist in the military, and so like a lot of like males died and stuff like that. Just more women slowly like accumulated more wealth, and then so like at some point, just there's a lot of just really really wealthy women, and then they would just use that money to like buy votes or like like back then you'd like do the same thing where like you would like buy alcohol and like food and like throw a celebration for like some politician, and they would like bribe people basically to get people voted or like to get people elected and stuff like that. And so like
Uh-huh.
yeah, I
That
think
sounds very familiar.
yeah. And so yeah. And I think it's just it was just like the way the succession of money went, it just more favored women, and then it just accumulated in the women because they just like didn't die as much as Spartans because they're a very very warlike city state. And so
Right.
yeah, and then
But women didn't go to war for the most part, right?
yeah,
In Spartan society, yeah. So
no,
that
that's
explains it.
yeah. But like but the money never actually passed. Like whenever a husband died, it always just like went to the woman, and then I don't think it ever. And I think yeah, and then like basically just like it passed down equally. So like if you just keep passing down equally, but more men die, eventually just like females like or like women just eventually just get more money, right? That's just kind of how that works.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I've seen some cultural anthropologists sort of uh conject. Is that a verb?
yeah, like a
Suggest, I guess.
conjecture.
Yeah, they've suggested that like Sparta could have become a sort of matriarchal society if things had continued
Yeah,
for much longer. But as we all know from the movie 300, they did they did not.
they beat back those Persians or something, I guess. Um, oh yeah, but like interesting stuff like that would be I don't know. I would hope to maybe think make people overthink things or something like that. It's like the same kind of logic where people try and show people think like women can't really be like scientists or something like that, and so people try and make big news stories about women scientists or like how um the female scientists over history just have been kind of like like brushed over or just like written out of history books and stuff like that.
Yeah,
um, like the famous one was like
true.
Watson and Crick, where their like lab assistant did like a ton of work, right? And like she just got zero credit like whatsoever.
Yeah, and
Um,
that's a good example because it's fairly recent.
yeah,
Or even more recently, there's that whole example with. Did you ever see Zero Dark 30? That movie that came out like
I did not see it.
9 years ago. Um,
Oh,
I mean, it's a really good film, but it's based on a true story of like the woman who helped hunt down Osama bin Laden. And I mean, I have mixed feelings about the hunt for Osama, but like, it was mostly like due to her work as a military woman, and like more or less, you had like these sort of patriarchal figures trying to stop her at every turn. And she still like managed to hunt him down.
right.
Um, but you never hear anybody like saying Osama was caught by a woman, right? Like no one ever says that.
Hmm. Yeah, fair enough. Okay. I have so much more, so I think we're gonna talk forever.
That's
Um,
fine. I've
yeah,
got another hour.
hour. Okay. Well, We'll see if we can
But
get
I mean,
this done in
I'm
an
always
hour.
down to like save what we've got left for another discussion because I like
Yeah.
doing these. Yeah.
I like talking about these things too, but then it's like I upload like a video or like it's like 2 hours long, and I'm like, yeah, that's okay. But like, okay, so for instance, so I feel like this isn't something that I would say, but if I'm trying to put myself into the mind of someone who might be like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" Puff Shake is, what would you say the question like, can is race performed then? Like, what if gender can be
Um.
performed? Like, why is race performed? Like, race is
Ooh.
what's the distinction? It seems both to be very social or cultural, or like certain like things are put on like black people or people of color and stuff like that, and like it seems like there's a performative type aspect to it.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree that there's probably a performative aspect, especially when you see varying degrees of people exhibiting things like uh, I don't really feel comfortable using a culture that isn't a white culture, but maybe I have to. Um, I would say that you see enough variability in something like people exhibiting the many facets of like Hispanic culture, that it's safe to say there's some performative aspects there, right? Because not everybody whose parents were immigrants from Central or South America is going to involve themselves in that sort of preeminent culture as much as others might. That's just sort
Okay.
of the reality. Um, I was discussing this a little bit on my stream, I think yesterday, but even though I do agree that there's like a performative aspect to race, I wouldn't say that the race can be sort of seen as constructed in the same way that gender is. Um, Mainly because when I think we talk about race, when we talk about race in this country, generally we're talking about the color of somebody's skin, right? And
Right.
there are Italian people who are darker than some Hispanic people, so like your definitions start to get pretty cloudy.
Right. I mean, that
And
doesn't matter to those
race is
people.
more about perception than it is about identity.
Well, gender performativity doesn't care about identity, I feel like.
Um, I feel like it cares about identity insofar as it is. Well, I shouldn't say I feel. It seems to me like gender performativity is sort of tangentially related to identity. Like if my identity is that I am gender fluid, right?
Mhm.
Um, that's still like me performing a mix of male and female binary roles, just
Right.
in sort of a unique confluence.
Okay. But so, like, if there's a black person and we say, like, there's certain black culture, because there is black culture, right? That is just like a thing that exists. Same with there is white culture
Yeah.
and stuff like that. It's kind of the very generalized statement, though. But like, I could just say the same thing where, like, like a black person could individually, because like obviously we both agree that anybody can just do express stuff however much they like. But let's say a specific type of music, right? Like hip hop or rap, and especially maybe a certain kind of artist would be considered a part of black culture, right?
Yeah, and I
Like,
definitely see culture as being performative. I definitely would agree with that.
okay.
Sorry to
And
cut you off.
no, you're fine. Um, okay. Well, so then I guess I'm playing a devil's advocate here, which I actually don't like doing, but I wrote all this stuff down.
That's
Um,
okay.
yeah. Like, because like this goes back to this before, right? If I'm allowed to be like, oh, like, well, like, what if like race is being performed, and I can say, I wrote down like we say, like, can we say that like black people are performing badly, and instead they should be performing more like white people at the end of the day? Or like for instance, like like there's a lot of white supremacists who say they don't like hate the color of the skin, right? Like they hate the culture. So like they're saying like
Mhm.
if black people would just act more like white people, I wouldn't care, right? I'm not. That's not right, but like that's like
No, I know.
what a
I'm still just like
racist.
scoffing at the idea that people
Yeah,
think
yeah.
that.
But like this is like what like I mean this is what like racists believe, right? Is that black people have some kind of inherent culture or something to them based on mostly the color of their skin. But I guess there's some cultural aspect to it now, because they want to hide their bigotry. And but like like it seems like could they just use performativity as another way of kind of like giving ammunition to possibly like white supremacists or something like that?
um, if we're talking about like in this context, we're talking about like cultural performativity, right? Um,
Sure, something like that.
I don't, I don't know. I don't think that gives them ammo because they still, at the end of the day, have to justify why white culture is superior, right? Like why
Yeah.
white culture should be the sort of normative framework by which other people who belong to other cultures should model themselves after.
Yeah. So, okay, I like this next point that I wrote down way better. So it seems to me that performativity obviously lends a credence that these things are like not natural, right? That they are either, let's say, either like chosen or, especially when you use the word perform, right? It seems like it would be kind of difficult to have someone do something they didn't want to do. So they might be like, they're like choosing to do it, but maybe it's unintentional or like it's unconscious, but like they're still kind of choosing to do it. And like I have a problem with this because like I'm a big fan of like somebody like doing identity and like what like feels right to them like internally. And
Uh-huh.
so like saying like
Yeah, me
this
too.
gender, and so like saying like gender can be performed, it seems like somebody could very easily just think, right, that, oh, well, like they're choosing to do these things. And so like then therefore, right, like why aren't they still, this is the same problem that I had before. So I guess this is just stated in a different way, right?
Hmm.
Where like, oh, like, no, like I don't like, people who say like I don't have a problem with gay people, but, and then like they just like say some homophobic thing where like they think like they just don't want like, I just don't want to see them, right, or something like that. Do you know, right? Like they're
Right. Yeah.
like I don't have a problem with gay people. I just don't want to see them on movies or or anything like that, right? And it's like it's just that's why, right? Like why are you? That's just
Yeah.
homophobia. Like if you like care that much about that, um, and so it seems I don't. This is maybe a weird critique, but it seems like I don't know how many people you've talked to, I guess, who might be actually homophobic or sexist in some way. But like,
Enough.
yeah, I oh really?
I mean, just people who I know, like in my personal life.
Right.
I'm from the South. I run into people who are pretty homophobic. Yeah.
Yeah. Would you like? So I yeah, I don't know if you talk about gender performativity, but like this idea that something is kind of not natural or fake, because that's kind of one of those things where that kind of got people over it, where we say like, no, like being gay is just as right as being straight. But then if you just kind of throw a lot of like different things out, when you're just like, oh, all these things are performed, it's kind of like they're chosen, it's kind of superfluous, it's kind of arbitrary maybe, and like, well, like now I can just do whatever I want. I can just do whatever I
Hmm.
feel like. You know what I mean? Like, oh, like I just don't like gay people, and they're like choosing to do this. Like, I don't want to see gay. I don't want to choose these things, right? It seems like it's not
Yeah.
hardline enough, maybe.
Well, at the end of the day, like these people have to be predicating their bigotry and anger on something concrete, right? Or else they're not going to feel justified in
Hmm.
doing so. So I think if anything, talking about performativity helps people realize that maybe that their bigotry or hatred or fear or whatever isn't predicated on anything real.
Right.
And if it can, if you can kind of get people walk people through those steps of showing that a lot of these things are constructed societally and they're not genetically inherited or whatever they think is going on. um, I think it's going to be a lot easier to sort of remove the foundation from everything that they've built their bigotry on top of, right?
Yeah.
That's the best answer I can come up with.
Yeah. I guess. Yeah. So this is like. So okay. I say this like. I do not. I'm not. I don't try and conflate gender with like someone's sexuality or like what they're attracted to, like their sexual attraction, right?
Hmm.
Um, But, like, it seems like when you talk about these things, it seems like if we're talking about gender as performed and that it's just repetitive and it's produced and it's performed, it just seems like, then, like, if someone's like, "Oh, well, like, gay conversion camps," like, then, like, do those work, right? Like, if I just make someone act like a straight person enough, they'll just become straight, right?
Yeah, well, I think you have to stress that there's um still something sort of naturalistic about someone's develop like if somebody has a developed preference or gender identity, you still have to respect that, right? Because like there's um as much as these things might be sort of socially enforced or socially learned,
Right,
by the time that by the time that like an identity, like for example my identity as being a man, by the time that's been formed, probably in my like middle teenage years, maybe earlier, depending on who I am, um, it's kind of too late to really like change that, right? Like, um,
I mean,
there's not
maybe.
really anything sort of optional about it at that point, I think.
Yeah. I mean, like,
And you can explore it further. Like I've sort of learned it just even over the past like 6 months that I have like a certain amount of attraction towards men, right? Like I've realized I'm a bit more bisexual than I used to think I was.
right.
So you can sort of there's a little bit of plasticity there, but I don't know that you can fully convert somebody,
right?
just based on, like, gender performativity. It doesn't seem like something that it
Hmm.
really supports.
Yeah. No, I do agree because like this is obviously not what I believe in because it does seem like though that if there's a big emphasis on reproduction and repetitive action, it would seem like you know, if someone like why would someone who acts straight or acts very heterosexually for like 30 years of their life, 40 years of their life, 50 years of their life, then all of a sudden like and they have like heterosexual relationships and then they're just like then they have like choose something else, right? Or not like choose, but like they realize that they were actually queer or not heterosexual in some way, right? And like this
Mhm.
happens, right? Like there's trans people who come out being trans a person like in like when they're very old, right? Like when they're 60 or 70, right? And so this kind of it seems odd to me if I'm saying like if gender is performed and it's like some of this repetitive reproduced action and this is like constructing some kind of performance, like how would people ever switch after 60 years and 70 years?
Yeah, I totally agree, yeah, and I mean, even if you are going to sort of do a lot of introspection and sort of delve into like, your core sexuality, or I guess I should say your core gender identity,
Mhm.
that has to be sort of a voluntary process, right? Nobody can force you to do that. It's sort of like meditating. Like, no one can lock you in a room and, take away all your rights and be like, "Okay, you have to meditate and you have to
Right.
perform introspection or else we're gonna kill you," or
Yeah.
something like that, you
And
know?
that's where
It's
like
not really
yeah,
something you can force.
we would say there's like an internal reality to this, but Butler very clearly at least stated one's gender is not an internal reality. Which again, like yeah, like you don't
Yeah,
and so like
that's a
that's
tough one.
yeah. Um so well I mean
I
like
think
move
I
on.
I think what I'm hoping that what she means when she says that is that the root of gender is, not internal, right? I would say, like, gender's origins are sort of
Yeah.
external, but they can be internalized. I think that's a separate argument.
From what I read, that is not what she meant, but like
Okay, well, then I
yeah.
definitely disagree with Butler.
Yeah. From what I read, she said like it's that's always like it's always some kind of it has different words that I can't remember, but it has something to do with Foucault's like institutions or systems of power and something like that. I don't care
Mhm.
at the end of the day. I really don't because that's like that's not important to me because I much more care about like the I like I said at the beginning like the ethical stuff of it, and so it's more me like saying trying to show or at least what I think is why or problems maybe talking to a everyday person about this or not like an everyday person or something like that or a person who might be on the fence, which I'll get into later. Actually, much better points about that. Um, so I wrote
Well,
this down.
yeah, yeah,
What's
I
up?
agree with you.
Yeah. I wrote this down. I said, it's like, how can you simultaneously say that something is performed and we become it, but also that it is constantly changing? Is that true? Is that what you say? Is that not what you
I
say?
don't know that gender is constantly changing. I think it has a certain amount of plasticity or a certain amount of wiggle room depending on just over time, right? Your preferences are going to change over time just the same way I mean, I don't want to be too reductive here, but like your taste in food might change over time, right? I didn't like Bloody Marys last year, but I've discovered this year that I do like Bloody Marys.
Right.
Um,
I
it's a
don't.
really
Yeah.
reductive comparison, but like you sort of see what I'm getting at.
Yeah, and that goes back to taste, which isn't it like that's how like and that's like just expression, which is how I would personally view gender. Like when I said before, I gave that example where like like somebody who plays soccer, right? That just it just feels right to them. That's like I would say the word taste, right? That fits their
Mhm.
taste. And so like again, that's the same thing with like however someone wants to express themselves in any which way, it just kind of fits their taste. And your taste is based on genetic factors, biological factors, sociological factors, psychology, and it's also
Yeah,
based on just previous experiences, right? And things like that.
exactly. That's what I was gonna say. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like I like the word taste and actually because like Nietzsche uses it in like a really, really pretentious way. But like a lot of things do just come down to taste. Like even if you kind of um project it out of just like the food realm, right? Like not talking about just food, but just, like whatever your taste in video games is, or whatever your taste in
Mhm.
art is, or whatever your taste in how you want to express yourself or how you want to dress or how you want to be, right? Like just it's up to taste, right? And then I guess if I use the word taste, that's a lot more a common word as well, and it's also a very much
Yeah.
so thing that people understand that like, oh well, people have different tastes, right? Like who cares?
I think
Like,
that's a good way
whatever.
of putting it. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
Um.
Um, I have
But
a good question here on the sort of related topic, actually.
yeah, go for it.
Um, so do you think okay, so let's say in this sort of hypothetical scenario that somebody dates women their entire life until they're 30, and then after that they have a sort of out of the blue experience where they hook up with a guy and they end up really liking it, even though before they that thought wasn't appealing to them, right? They weren't necessarily interested in sexual activities with men. Do you think that that is a shift in that person's sexuality or let's say gender identity as well? Um, or do you think that it's sort of just a realization of like an pre-existing underlying preference?
So like, are you just asking me personally or in relation to something?
Yeah, like I'm not quite sure how I feel about this. I've never thought about it before, so
Yeah,
I'm just
sure. So
curious.
anecdotally or me personally, I've always been like straight, I suppose. But then
Mhm.
probably after reading a bunch of philosophy or feminist thought, oh no, the feminists turned me gay. But no, I'm not gay. But like, it's more like at the end of the day, I'm like, man, what am I attracted to? I don't even know. I don't care, right? Like
Right.
at the end of the day, I'm just like, I don't even know. But again, I would say that was one of those things where, yeah, I feel like it's one of those things where maybe you're starting from like a false premise where you might say that you're like why can't whatever your sexual attraction change, right? Like, does it have to be a realization? Like, does it
Yeah,
not?
it's true.
Like why why are you asking these questions in the first place? I guess personally, is it because a lot of people are scared themselves, right? Like a lot of it's been shown that it's not uncommon for homophobic tendencies to come from people who are scared of possibly being gay or queer in some way, right? Like
Right.
they've right, and like it feels challenging to their heterosexuality. And it's not like heterosexuality is maybe very important to them, but it's just like an identity, and so like it feels like a very personal attack to them. And so the same way where like if somebody attaches their identity to a video game, even though it's something that's kind of frivolous, like if you attack that video game, they'll feel very personally about it, and they might actually literally like get into violence over it, right? Because
Sure.
the person can attach their identity to anything. Like anything, I would say it just comes down to like, I don't know, I forgot about this, but I do like the word um, taste, and you can say like taste change and things like that.
Sure.
And to, I know, and like I don't want to just keep saying like who cares. I'm just like like, but that
No,
is
yeah, I think I agree with that to an extent.
yeah, it's an
Like basically,
ambivalence.
yeah, and like off of what you were saying a second ago, like nah, I forgot it.
Oh,
Sorry, this happens sometimes.
it's okay.
I'm trying to get better about this whole like ADHD problem I have, where I forget my points as I'm talking about them,
Wait,
but
oh, you said, do
we're
you
not
actually
quite
have
there yet.
ADHD or
I haven't been diagnosed, but like I
okay?
fit every single symptom, including the one that people with ADHD are usually tired out when they drink caffeine, and that's exactly what happens to me. And that's like a thing
Uh,
that's unique to people with ADHD. So I think it's fair for me to say that I have
that's
it, but
okay.
I don't know.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Uh, yeah, I guess for that question, yeah, I do think that's one of those things where this is a reason why I think I said this for the suicide when I talked to Dr. Dreas. I talked to a guy who I don't know if you know what Dr. Dreas is.
I don't.
He's a very also small streamer. He's like gets I don't know like 5 viewers as well or something like that. And he just started very
Mhm.
recently too, like a month ago. But he's actually
Cool. It's about when I started.
yeah he's like a social worker of like 15 years, and he's like an
Oh,
actual
nice.
yeah he like actually deals with like I think he's worked in like the trauma or abuse center or something like that.
Wow,
But no, he actually just streams and he just like plays video games, right? He's just like a dude that plays video games, right? And he
that's
also
cool.
his stream is also actually something that he likes. He wants like people to call in and just like chat and maybe talk about mental health stuff and just like be
Okay,
cool
cool.
about it or like calm about it or like not
That's a
necessarily talk
really good
about your
idea.
yeah like and maybe not necessarily like talk about your problems to him at the end of the day. Or I feel like you'd probably be okay with that. But just
Mhm.
like being like trying to like create like a helpful environment for that. And I talked to him about I tried to like bring like philosophy and suicide, and it was like a two and hour and 30-minute conversation. So I can't
Wow,
do.
nice.
Um, but yeah, but no, he's I forgot why I brought that up. He was a cool dude. I don't know why.
That sounds cool. I should check him out.
Yeah, I did. I don't know at all.
That's
Okay,
okay.
so
I lost my point too.
yeah, I mean, I have this thing. So I said like, isn't performing gender too simple? I've said this before. I don't know. Blah 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 blah. I've said this before. Like, does not take historical accounts into place. Blah blah blah. Like, why is putting on makeup a girl thing? Right? Like, guys don't really put on makeup, except some guys actually do, and I know a lot of dudes in college who did. Right? But it is more of a girl thing,
Yeah.
right? Like, why is
Yeah,
being
it's typically a girl thing, yeah.
yeah, and it's like why is being buff a male thing, right? Like, there's women like technically like physically like women can't be like as strong as men, but like women are actually better long distance runners as far as I know.
I have heard
Um,
that, yeah.
yeah, you can also look this like I'm pretty sure they just stuff like that, right? Um,
That's why I object so heavily. Oh man, I get so triggered when I hear Ben Shapiro talk about women's sports. Oh man,
Yeah.
I don't know if you tuned into my stream at any point when I was watching that. But that's like what I started thinking of just now when you brought up
Yeah.
like women being better long distance runners, because you could tell that to Ben Shapiro and he would probably get triggered AF.
Yeah. And it's like the same thing where, like, some sports don't have to be physical at all, like chess. Like, people thought women were bad at chess, and it's kind of been just shown to be like sexist stuff, like,
Yeah, I
basically at the end
can't
of the
see
day.
any argument as to why that would be. Like, there doesn't seem like any sort of neurochemistry would support that.
Yeah. No, it's not. It's just that people want to believe that women are like the inferior sex, right?
I
That's
hate it
been
so much. Makes me
dating
so
dating back for a while. Um, then yeah, like these things are social, but they're also economic as well. It depends on the context, blah blah blah. Certain ideas of gender change based on the time and the school of thought. I already brought up the lesbian thing already. That our society says a lesbian should or act a certain way when obviously they don't have to, they don't want to.
Mhm.
It's not that they don't want to. It's just like, you know, it's also another thing too, where like I also am. I will bring this. I should probably get to that, but that's almost the next point. Actually, that's good. I'm almost at the end.
Cool.
Is like there, in my opinion, there should be nothing attached to gender at all. Like this doesn't have anything to do with gender performativity. But like if you're whatever gender expression your is, or whatever your sexuality is, or anything like that, I don't think there should be ever anything attached to anything at all. Like no gender roles, right? Complete abolition of gender, right?
Yeah, that's the ultimate goal. It seems like. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, oh, and that's one of the things where like just start with the end, I guess. See if you can get your way there.
Yeah.
Do you have to do that? If not, like, pouring any sense, just yourself. I even actually already said this before. I wrote down, gay men started acting very, very buff because of societal homophobia as kind of a backlash type thing.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna
And I
go.
think it's fair to say that was like it's a fair reaction.
Yeah, yeah, it
Uh,
is. Yeah, it is definitely
but
a way
it's
to
like,
combat it.
but yeah, I mean, I think you can still say it's fair without saying it's productive.
Yeah, like there's interesting ways of doing it because it's also a problem too because it's not like it's on the queer community or anything like that. There is tons of systems in place that like take like cultural appropriation and things like that that kind of permeate through and make certain stereotypes and stuff exist and allow things to shift. Like the purpose of cultural appropriation is to actually absorb problematic things, like for instance hip hop, which was like super fuck the police and things like that, right?
Right.
And then and then like capitalism slash white people basically kind of absorbed it, and then it just became much more um
Like
docile or
commercial.
like yeah, like commercial. Yeah, commercial's the good word, right? And that's kind of what cultural appropriation actually does, and is why it is kind of bad, is that it removes the meaning from things.
Wow, I've never heard this argument before, but this is really good. I like this.
Yeah, because it's like the same words. Like, do you know what dreads are?
Yeah.
Do you know why people did dreads?
Oh, I remember someone telling me, but I forgot.
Yeah, they were originally like a protest against something. I can't remember what it is, but the important part is that dreads actually used to mean something, and it was a protest against something, and I can't remember what that something is because now dreads don't mean that, right? Dreads are
Does
just like
anyone in chat
something.
know why Dread started?
Yeah, but like yeah, I could Google it, but but now dreads are just like something you're like, oh, that hippie guy over there has dreads, right? And it's right, and but like it actually was started as a protest for something, and so like and when these things get appropriated in weird ways and like get put out into like the mass media, like this is how they dilute the people in power like dilute
Yeah,
dilute like revolutionary thought or like a contrarian thought to the status quo, something like that.
totally. Yeah.
um I'm gonna go back up here and read some things, which is I went back to what do I really care about in being a humanist, secular, loving everybody. And so what's interesting to me is like
Mhm.
I like arguments like this where uh, Plato was in something, I can't even remember in what dialogue this is, but he brings up the fact that they had gyms, like they had gymnasiums, right, where people would like go and work out, and they would do more than like gymnasiums were like more of like a hangout place, I think, kind of back there as well.
Mhm.
But it was about working out, and like they did like wrestling there and stuff like that. I don't know, it was like a sportsy place, right? And so it was more like a rec center, probably, I guess, than the gym.
Yep.
Mm,
Just a handful of sweaty
yeah.
dudes getting it on. Yeah.
Just go down the YMCA. That song is just about picking up dudes at the
It's
YMCA.
really prescient. Yeah.
It's just, um, And it's crazy too, because like when I was younger, I just heard that song. You just do the dance, right? That's it. I
Mhm.
didn't. I
That's
didn't know
true.
it was about gay guys at all.
When did that
Um,
song come out?
um, I'm not sure. I don't know. Sorry.
YMCA.
Like I'm gonna say like
So,
the mid, is it the late 70s,
wow, 1978. Yeah,
1978. Okay, I said it before you said the answer. Nice. All right,
nice, good job.
I'm smart. I feel validated. Okay. So the Plato and the gymnasium stuff is I guess like 20 years ago. Um, I'm sorry. In the time the dialogue takes place, uh, people just work out in the gymnasium naked together, right? And
Yeah,
they're all men, right? And they're like, this is like actually really nice. Apparently, like they did it, and it just like is very much so about bonding and stuff like that. And I don't know if it was homosexual at all. Like I have no
it's
idea.
very like anti-toxic
Yeah.
masculinity.
But yeah, and so, uh, but like one of the things was like Socrates was saying like this might have been in the Republic, right? Where there was people who were just like saying sexist things like, oh, like women are obviously like inferior, they can't do stuff, right? And Socrates was like, well, no, like 20 years ago, everyone poo-pooed the idea of having like everyone be naked and working out together in the gymnasium. And like now, and like everyone said the same exact thing about like women. Like everyone said like that you can't do this, this is wrong, this is goes against the natural order, blah blah blah, this is not how things work. And then like we did it, and then everybody likes it, right? And so, and like literally he was like advocating for like we should do that with women too. We should actually bring women into the gymnasium and they'll be naked too, everybody will be naked, everybody will be
Co-ed
working out,
gyms, yeah.
yeah, and it'll be great. And I'm like, yeah, that would be great. Like like if we lived in a
Nice.
society where people could just do that and nobody had to worry about other people assaulting each other, right? Like that would probably be, you'd probably live in a good, that would probably be a good like litmus test of if you lived in an okay society, if you could do that, right?
Yeah, if you
Uh,
live in a society with actual equality, yeah,
yeah.
that would
Um,
be a good litmus test.
and because it's scary, because like I don't know, like women, a lot of women don't run at night for the fear of just being assaulted and the realistic
Yeah,
fear of being assaulted. It's very sad.
there was this we went over a list. This was like a under the guise of a social study. We went over this in my gender studies class as well, where they asked a group of like I don't know, a couple hundred men, things that they check for when they're walking home alone at night.
Right.
And the list was like maybe one thing, like
Yeah.
are my keys in my pocket or something like that.
Phone,
And
wallet.
then yeah, and then for women, the list is extremely long, and it's
Yeah.
and it's stuff that like would drive you crazy eventually if
Yeah.
you had to deal with it every day.
Hmm.
Like,
It stresses you
is
out.
there anybody following me? Like, am I in visible light so that if I get stolen, someone will see it happen? Like, are there people around? Do I have my phone in a place where I can grab it? Have I dialed 911 in my pocket? Right? Do I have my like
Mhm,
self defense weapon in my purse? Like, it's all this stuff that you have to think about.
mhm.
Just kind
Yeah,
of shows that like it's a good, like you said, like a litmus test to tell whether parity actually exists or not.
yeah. And I think that's a really interesting point because again, if I'm just talking about whether or not gender performativity is a good way to explain to people or like tell people things that really gets a point across, I think things like that do a much better job of getting the point across. You know,
I think so too. Yeah.
maybe not exactly for like abolishing gender, but like making people understand that things are different. You know, like things are not
Yeah.
fair, things are not equal. And so saying things like that I think is really important. And like and that's also one of those things where um talking about is too, it's like too, like I don't know, want to say like too philosophical, but like you know, like people need to experience other people. Like one of the biggest ways stereotypes and bigotry just keeps happening is because nobody interacts with anybody, right? Like
Hmm.
anybody who's ever interacted with like immigrants before, they're just like everybody else, like or something, like nobody, it's not actually that big of a deal.
Yeah, and I
And so
agree that it's going to be really hard to change anybody's mind using only abstract
yeah.
arguments.
Mhm.
Like
No,
it's
yeah,
gonna
yeah.
not gonna work for most people, especially the type of people who are going to be bigoted in the first place.
Yeah. No, I guess yeah, something I like to talk about, I guess.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. Yeah, I think you've won me over to that idea. That
Yeah. Just like more like real examples, more like historical examples, things like that, and like always I'm always a big fan of like stats and stuff. Like if somebody says like, oh, like I don't like immigrants, it's like why? Like they commit more crime. It's like, go fucking look up the crime statistics for immigrants and then come
and
back
like
at me,
think
dude.
of reasons that that might be, even if we already give you that's
Yeah.
true.
No, I think universally, or I'm sorry, worldwide, refugees and immigrants do not commit more crime than the native population, like anywhere. Like in very few cases and in very few places and stuff like that, they do. But like averaging it out worldwide, they're the same or less. Especially refugees. Refugees are like way less than
Mhm.
the native population in terms of crime rate.
Yeah, just psychologically speaking, I mean, if you're an immigrant somewhere, it seems like it would behoove you to
You,
like,
no,
especially in somewhere like the United States nowadays, to be
you
on your best behaviors. Because like, I mean, especially if you're living under the Trump administration, they're looking for
mhm.
any reason to get rid of you. You know?
Yeah, no, you commit a crime, they deport you. Like that's it. Like
Yep.
that's also the reason why like it's because they're a vulnerable population. It's one of those problems where like a homeless person isn't probably really going to attack you unless they're like a super drugged out person. But then like it doesn't matter that they're homeless. Any super drugged out person who wants to attack you is going to do it. But like a homeless person's never going to attack you because they can't go to hospitals. They can't really
Hmm.
like they're a very very vulnerable population, and which is why homeless people have such a high crime rate against them. Right. If you ever
Hmm.
look up really really sad things, there's no actual good statistics on this, but I watched a woman talk who talked to like homeless women specifically, and she said she talks to like hundreds and like thousands of homeless women. She always asks them if they've ever been raped, and their answer is always yes. Like every single one, right?
Man, that's so sad.
And so it's like, and the thing is, a lot of these problems also comes down to like statistics and actual good research data, where like we just don't keep any track of it, like homeless people, because they
Yeah.
obviously don't report it because they're shunned from society in different ways and things like that, right?
And who's going to advocate for them other than people
Yeah,
who
nobody.
just happen to be altruistic? You know?
Yeah, and it's also like then also like it's difficult for other people to advocate them too if they're like working 2 jobs or 3 jobs and something like that, right? Which is like
Yeah, it's so true.
I want people to act better, but I also recognize that a lot of people are put down and are also have a lot of their own worries and are in like crushing debt or something like that as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons. There's a lot of different circumstances that could lead you to become homeless or to be in a drug induced stupor or whatever
Right.
else people think of homeless people stereotypically.
Mhm.
I was researching that a little bit on stream the other day. I'm trying to remember what it was called. I just looked it up the other day. It's a kind of attribution error, and I think it's called, is it external attribution bias? There's a
Take your
kind of
time.
attribution error where people are more likely to, when they're looking at somebody who lives outside of their immediate circle, they're more likely to attribute issues that person is experiencing to personal fault, as opposed to
Yeah.
when they are talking about themselves, they're more likely to find external factors as to why
Yeah.
they're in a certain debilitating circumstance. There's a word
Mhm.
for it, but I can't remember what it is.
Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about. I would also um so explanations for this. So this is where if I'm giving like a good general rule, I'm a big proponent of, or I'm sorry, opponent of ascribing anything as like natural stuff, even kind of psychology, because it's always kind of you don't ever really want to go down that road, in my opinion. Like for instance, people can just say like, oh, people naturally, based on our psychology or whatever, just when we are talking about ourselves, we're selfish, and so therefore, I always do like, oh, I cut that guy off in traffic, but like it was a problem because like like my kid in the back seat acted up and I wasn't paying attention, right? It was like it was an understandable fault,
Exactly
but
what I'm talking about.
yeah,
Yeah.
and but then like you see somebody cut you off in traffic and you're like, wow, that guy's a dick. Like that guy didn't pay any attention at all, and I instead
Yeah.
of just being like, people make mistakes sometimes. I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
people mess up, right? We all
Yeah,
mess up.
it's a tough bias to overcome for
Um,
sure.
oh, but that's another thing to that though is that it might just be a bias. But again, my general rule to probably anybody is like if you think anything is natural, just don't think that. Just even if it is, right? Even if it is actually based on like psychology or some biological
Yeah.
fact, just like don't think it is because again, another reason I can give this very much so or is in capitalism and stuff like that, we have a very individualistic society, right? And I could kind of
Mhm.
tie that into individualism, where you're always saying like people should like take personal responsibility and stuff like that. And so, even though this doesn't quite explain how it would work for yourself, like why you might explain things to external factors, because you know more stuff at the end of the day, which I could maybe relate to scientism. But like if you're individualistic, you'll always see other people's problems or even other people's like benefits as being like their personal responsibility or like they did something good, right?
Mhm.
Because like in capitalist we're like, so capitalism is very much so like if you like work hard you'll make it, right? Like things are based off like the sweat of your brow and stuff like that, and so like that's very much so tied into whatever your actions are doing, you deserve them, and like whether they're good or bad, you deserve what you get. Which also, now that I say that out loud, kind of ties back maybe to religious thought as well with Christianity and Catholicism.
Yeah, we expect everybody to be accountable for their own circumstances. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, okay. I can. I also like. Do you ever hear Mr. Rogers' comment on attractiveness? It's just like a fun quote.
I haven't, but I'd love to
He
hear it.
he apparently Mr. Rogers is possibly a bisexual icon. Because
I've heard that.
he
Yeah.
he said one time in an interview where someone asked him like I guess maybe someone asked him about his sexuality or something. I have no idea, but his answer was like um he was something like like if like straightness is a scale from 1 to 10, I'm maybe like a 5, right? And he said like like I see women sometimes and I find some of them attractive, and I see men sometimes and I also think some of them are attractive. I'm like, oh, like that's nice. Um,
Nailed it.
yeah. And so yeah, and that's I say that because like I at the end of the day I feel like that's how people should act too. It's just like yeah, I find some of those people attractive. I find some of those people attractive. Or if you don't find any of them, who cares, right? I don't whatever.
Yeah, it seems like it would be safe to just kind of assume everybody is more or less like pansexual. Is that the identity that some people like, where you're just sort of attracted to whoever
Um,
you're attracted to? Seems like it doesn't need to be more
I
complicated than
think
that.
I think pansexual actually has a bit of like being over sexual to it too, because I always thought pansexual people always kind of said they like want to have sex all the time with everybody.
Oh, okay. Well,
But
that's
I
definitely
could be wrong. That might just be wrong. I don't know if that actually is some stigma against pansexual people or not. I have no
yeah, but
idea.
it seems like we don't have to really like. It seems like this is actually what I was gonna say earlier. Now I've remembered. Cool, came full circle.
Oh,
It seems like we
nice.
don't really like we shouldn't really feel the need to be beholden to identifying any sort of way. It seems like that's where a lot of like these persistent issues come from, like not just outdated gender roles, but like the very idea that we should have to identify as something, um, in order for people to understand us better. Seems like kind of a hold up as well. Does
Hmm.
that make sense?
Yeah, no, I agree. Um, I was going to put how do straight cis people feel about this, and then I realized that I have to go down and then actually read this one, which one of the things I know about Butler is that she actually talked about how this was a like some kind of power dynamic, and then being queer or something like that, or like just being like not like non-binary in some way, was actually always subverting power, and that she also said like kind of as a political kind of thought, she said that people should do this as well, and I had a really big problem with this because it seemed like she was very much so tying gender to politics, like intricately, like they're like no separating it, right? Which I assume you
She's
probably
saying
wouldn't agree with.
people should have like a obligation to how I'm not sure how to. I feel like I don't fully understand yet.
No,
Can you like rephrase for me?
sure. So like this is what I read. So this is what I guess she maybe said in Gender Trouble or like one of her other books. Was that being non-binary, right, or being queer in some way, uh, was always a subversion of the power dynamic, or like a subversion of the heterosexual norm, and was therefore like always a subversion of that power, like of that power structure. And then she also went on to make the claim that it is a subversion and that people should always be subverting, like people should be subverting it as well, like people should be queer to subvert that dichotomy,
Mm,
that hegemony.
hegemony, yeah.
Yeah. This is something like I know like there was a quote and I didn't copy and paste it, but this is something that I know she said at one point at least.
Yeah, I think I'm resisting that a little bit just because I feel like it's a little bit or antithetical to what she's getting at in general, or at
Yeah.
least what I feel like gender philosophers are getting to in general,
Hmm.
which is like you should feel comfortable just with whatever your identity is. I don't know if
Yeah.
you can after saying that, I don't know if you can prescribe something like gender queer identification as being like the ultimate like goal.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. And I didn't think you would disagree, but it really bothered me. So I wrote some stuff.
Yeah,
And
that's
maybe I'll
definitely
just
inconsistent. I actually haven't heard that quote before or
uh,
that
yeah. Let's see. I wrote
that
one thing
statement.
was these excluded practical identities permanently threaten the hegemonic norm. Like it makes sense that she would say that they are subversions of power, and then and that like I remember her quoting like that they should be doing that as well. But like
Okay.
even if this is I'm pretty sure this is correct, but let's say even if it's not correct, um, I guess like one of the other problems with like fights like this, as I said, like like I don't think that like any kind of political or subversion of power like action like this should ever be ascribed to like identity, because like I think it's identity. I don't think anybody should ever feel like I think feeling like your personal identity, which is like if you're gay or if you're a trans woman or if you're whatever, like feeling like that is just a political. action, which like unfortunately it is right a lot of the time, but like that feeling is very unhealthy and feels very
Yeah.
like bad for that person, right? Like to always feel like my identity is literally called into question and is a political thought, whereas me being straight, nobody cares, right? I'm just straight, right? Whatever. Like,
Yeah, even if it is political, it doesn't seem necessary to sort of like remind people of that.
right, yeah. Um, I don't, yeah, and that's one of those things where, you know, like whoever I say, let the LGBTQ plus like be whoever, like whatever they are, whoever they are, it doesn't matter. Um, at the end of the day, they can just be whoever can be whoever. And I'm a big
Yeah,
fan
I
of
agree.
like they're minorities. At the end of the day, I'm like, in terms of like if we're considering this like kind of like a type of fight or something like that, I'm not like a big fan of like having whatever minority or whatever like oppressed person like coming into the fight. I'm a big proponent of not I'm a big proponent of trying to get other people who might be more well off, so therefore probably like the not so oppressed people to actually fight instead. And like you know, like fighting obviously doesn't necessarily mean like violence. It just means like standing up and talking and things like that at the end of the day
Yeah,
usually.
and
Um
I think the reason people sort of push back against that is because it kind of comes across as like normative saviorhood.
yeah,
But I don't think that it has to be seen that way.
right,
I've thought a lot about that, obviously, because I didn't want to be doing something sort of ethically wrong
right,
by getting on Twitch and then sort of preaching all of my like um, sort of constructivist philosophy ideas without like people without any sort of input from the people I'm actually trying to defend.
right.
But I've kind of landed on the idea that I think I'm comfortable um, doing that as long as what I say is actually like representative of of the people I'm trying to defend at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean like as if that is a worry, I'd always suggest, you know, like reading stuff that, you know, like actual people write. Like there's probably trans journalists or something like that who specialize in those things, right? Um,
Yeah, yeah, like I feel comfortable talking about like trans identity because I've
yeah.
made the effort to study it. Yeah.
Mhm. And it's also one of those things where like even if that is something that you're concerned about, you can always just dial it back down. Where like for instance, like you don't have to talk about gender performativity. You can just be like, motherfucker, these people should be equal and they're being like
Yeah,
discriminated
it's true.
against, right? Like you don't
It's true,
necessarily
yeah.
actually you don't need to be super hardcore logical about it. You can just be like, these people are being discriminated against. These people are being discriminated against in these ways. I don't need to get philosophical about this, right? This is just wrong. Like
Mhm.
these laws should be changed. Trans people are like they're more likely to have crime committed to them. This is bad, right? This is bad. Like same with like black people, right? Like get all those people out of prison, right? Like this is ridiculous, right? And
Mhm.
I don't really need to talk about like white supremacy or anything like that at the end of the day. Maybe I might have to convince somebody, but if I'm just like trying to spread a message, I can just be like, I don't know, like talk about like how like so many people of color are locked away for like marijuana and stuff like that, and now we're just like legalizing it, and so it's just like
Right.
get all those people out of prison, all those people in prison who are put in there for weed charges, just send them out, just release them now, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I don't.
Yeah. I actually have like a tangentially related question there. Is it fine if I go a little bit off topic for a sec?
Oh, I don't care.
Um, do you think that people who have served prison time for a charge like for like possession of marijuana, if marijuana is federally legalized, do you think those people should deserve to be paid reparations
I
for their
if
time?
I'm just talking about my ideal society, it would absolutely be yes. But at the end of the day, I would say the best way to do it would probably be no, but like give them the things that we give everybody. Like so, for instance, I'm for abolishing homelessness, give everybody
Hmm.
homes. So like, and then I'm also for giving everybody like human rights and living wages. So like, you know, I would much rather just do those things, and then just like when these people who have been what I would say like wrongfully committed and things like not committed to prison, no, committed is like an mental institute, like wrongfully jailed. They would just like I don't know, like maybe you do give them some kind of monetary like boon, like some kind of like you give them like $10,000 or something like that, or I don't know, like or something like that, like just to like help them out.
Yeah.
And then like and then at the end of the day, maybe also you could place them in like a special status where like they get like extra like federal care for like maybe finding a job and things like that. But then
Yeah,
also
that'd be good.
like everybody like I don't want homelessness to exist. So like when these people come out, just make sure they have homes, right? And then also make sure they have a job and also make sure that they have food and they have healthcare, right? Like give universal healthcare. And so like you know like solving those big problems also solves a lot of little problems, because at the end of the day, you can't really like make up for your mistakes. You just have to like move forward better, right? Like
Mhm.
reparations would be good, but like I just personally, I just think we should just make the society as it should be, like how it should be, and like to me, that's probably fine. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
That
that's a
that
form
seems
of reparations in itself, honestly, just, like, making things, like,
right.
equitable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just genuinely curious how you felt about that because I hear the question posed sometimes, and I think it's compelling.
I do like. Do you think? Well, I mean, what do you think? Do you have an answer that you like?
Yeah, I mean, I more or less agree with you. I think in a sort of utopian scenario, I think it would be good to pay reparations to anybody who is, freed from prison on the basis that the crime they were jailed for is no longer considered a crime. Yeah, because they have more or less wasted time at that point, right?
Mhm.
um, so I think it's probably good to maybe like try to make society as equitable for them as possible. And that would specifically mean addressing these sort of debilitating circumstances that ex-convicts deal with already, right? Like
Right.
in United States society currently, getting a job after you've been a convict is a lot harder. Applying for certain kinds of credit and loans and applying for to rent at certain places is going to be a lot harder as well. So making those things uh, far less debilitating would probably be the best way to pay those people reparations, I think, so they can just go back to living their lives
Yeah.
as they want to.
And I forgot. Always important is to just ask them as well. I'm remembering stuff about like Native Americans, where a lot of Native American tribes are like they don't want money, they just like want their land back and things like that.
Yeah.
And so that's also a thing too, where like you could just ask, you could like ask these communities like, what do you want? And if they're just like, I just want a secure living, right? Like I just want to come out of jail. I just want a guaranteed job. I just want a guaranteed place to live and things like
Hmm.
that. Then like, yeah, like then let's do that. And like, if they say something different, then let's listen to that and maybe do that, right? Like whatever that may be, right? Because I can't think of it, but like they might
Yeah,
have,
they would probably
right?
know better because they've
Yeah.
experienced it. Yeah, that's fair.
Um, so I think that's always an important thing, which is obviously because like that is probably being too white savory or something like that.
Hmm.
Where at the end of the day, there's like first at least pull these people, right? Like pull like whoever is being affected by this.
Sure.
Just ask
Yeah,
them, and then like and then start from there, right? And then
that
actually
seems
start.
best.
Yeah. Because
Yeah.
I don't know. Because that's the thing where I realize I'm like I actually don't know what like actual people in jail who are in jail because of dumb marijuana charges. Like I don't know what they think, right? Like I don't know what they think about this at all. I've never heard this anywhere actually.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that would be kind of my answer.
Okay. Cool.
So
Yeah, I'm
going
just
back to
curious.
gender performativity, it seems like seems like very individualistic as well as like a pressure to me.
Hmm.
And I'm like one of those persons that I think like so like for instance when we say like it's a subversion of power, it's like still going with like that. And so like to change things in a society, it's always like you need like collective action and collective pressure. And I'm not like a big fan of like focusing on some um some individual action as actually being able to like threaten something as big
Hmm.
as the United States of America or something like that, right? So I'm not like it seems like gender performativity kind of places maybe too much emphasis on the individual, but I'm not
Maybe so.
quite
Yeah.
sure there at the end of the day.
Would it be okay for me to assert? I'm not sure. I don't know the like denotative definitions of these terms very well, but would it be okay to assert that individual expression can be treated separately from individualism as a sort of form of organizing a populace? Um, so for
Oh,
example, like we can be collectivists
yeah.
but still have an emphasis on collective or on individual expression.
Yeah.
Um, just curious if that's something I could
Yeah,
like
yeah,
push
yeah, sorry.
for.
Yeah, yeah. So no, I'm actually probably not going to answer your question because I guess the thing that I'm talking about or I guess I said it weirdly. So I think there's like a miscommunication going on.
Okay, that's fine.
Um yeah, sorry. Unless you want me to answer what you're asking.
No, no, no. Yeah, feel free to pose it
Okay.
again.
Um the thing I guess I was trying to get at was that when was because like in Butler, if we accept the fact that I'm pretty sure she said that like these people should be subverting it in this way.
Mhm.
I'm not a fan of this because, like, for instance, yeah, like, so somebody being queer in some way is subverting it and is showing this falseness of heteronormativity, right? Like, they are doing that. Um, but, like, I'm not a fan of focusing on that for 2 reasons, which is, 1, um, I don't know if this is me being cruel, but, like, that person is never actually going to change society. Like, that person's never gonna, like, by themselves, even if, like, 1,000 people did that individually, that would never, like, change business hiring practices. You know what I mean? Like, that would never
Mhm.
change laws, right? If those thousand people got together and, like, actually did, like, local action and things like that, that would be fine. But, like, you don't need to, like, have your queerness politicized in such a way for that actually to happen, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I totally
Um,
agree.
and so it seems like it's like a little bit too focused. And then like that, I actually said both the points at once, which is that it's like the same thing with the plastic stuff. Where like me individually, I can do stuff to help, right? I can like reduce my consumption of certain things, but like to actually fix the problem, we need big collective action because we need big systemic changes, right? Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's yeah. And so the focus on the individual, like I like person thing, might be weird. Um,
Yeah, I think I see what you're getting at. I mean, it does seem kind of reductive to put all the emphasis for pushing for social pressure or social reform, I should say,
yeah,
on the topic of gender, um, on the individual. That seems like a sort of harmful thing to do. It seems kind of reductive to assume that you, the individual, after reading, X amount of literature, reading all of Butler's works and everything by Derrida or whatever else, that you're then sort of expected to create your own sort of social change. That seems a little bit like an impossible ask.
yeah. Yeah, that's why you gotta go for the good old socialism or communism or some crap like that. I don't know.
Yeah,
Just some kind of like collective action. That's just what you need. Um, I did write this where it said
yeah, I
like
agree with you.
yeah, like at the end like it did seem like Butler was trying to say that like doing like being queer was like a way to do like some kind of ethical action, like some kind of ethics at the end of the day. And I
Hmm.
read this is what like how to put it is like it seems like the bad part of it is like the way they phrase it was like the good to be maximized is not that of the subject but that of the other, where like when you're looking at it from this way, like the subject, like the person who is queer or whatever, um like when we look at it this way, we're not really caring about their happiness so much as like societal happiness. And I think that's like the wrong way to view gender, however someone may view gender, because it just seems like to me it just seems like an expression or an identity or like a taste thing at the end of the day.
Hmm.
um
Yeah, I think
and then,
that's fair.
oh man, we're almost done with everything.
Although I
Ah,
think Butler probably has, I do want to say Butler probably has good intentions by
yeah.
saying that, just because like I think a lot of sort of feminist literature, contemporary feminist literature, is interested in sort of reclaiming power for marginalized people, right? And
Mhm.
it can be like it could be a very empowering thing to think about yourself as sort of the a conduit through which gender reform could be advocated for.
Yeah. And I would
Um, yeah.
no. Well, no, to be a downer though, I'd like say the same thing where like it is nice to think that and that might give you a lot of personal value, but like that's putting too much personal responsibility on one person where like again, like like at the end of the day, I would still say like you need collective action. Like no matter how much like one person thinks that they're, at least, and this is my opinion, like you can disagree with me. Like I don't think no matter
No,
how
yeah, I
much,
agree with you.
yeah,
Yeah.
like it's like I for whatever um like no matter how much you just like wear a shirt that says never Trump on it, you still have to like do political action, right? You still have to talk to people, you still have to do whatever. Just like showing yourself in public like that does something, right? It's not nothing, right? But
Hmm. Yeah, for sure.
um it's like kind of it's not like you need to have the force and like the will behind it. Like you actually need to affect change. The thing though that like for instance, like showing more gay people or more queer people on movies, right? This doesn't necessarily affect political change, but what it does is allow and facilitate political change where you start to normalize things and stuff like that. And that is very, very, very important. It's just like placing too much importance on it, I think is uh losing sight of stuff, something like that. I don't know. That might
No, yeah, I
yeah.
totally agree with what you're saying. Yeah, I just thought it was
Um,
important to like sort of point out probably like the intent behind.
yeah.
Yeah,
No, that's
before
such a
we
thing where
move
like
past it.
everything that like Judith Butler has done, as far as I know, has been like probably very, very good, right? Like
Hmm.
everything that I know, and so like it's one of those things where like you don't actually need to read any of her literature, and you just like know what her like political action is, and like it's fine. And like that's also one of the things where too is like you don't actually need to get like too hardcore like philosophical about these things to actually affect change and like make people's lives better and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I also thought like if we're saying like someone's the way that they're expressing their gender is a subversion of power against the heteronormativity, I also feel like you're not saying this, but like if that was to be said, I feel like this just kind of like puts like someone like someone like me, I'm just like a cis straight white guy, probably most likely, right?
Hmm.
And so like if someone says like, oh, these queer people, they're doing such a great job with like ethical or political actions, right? I feel like this is just like unnecessarily like barring or putting up barriers to like actually have just like people who are heterosexual, because like you don't kind of want to like barriers like that are sometimes necessary, but like I think this one's completely unnecessary if you're trying to like frame it like that, where you want the people who have the most power, which would just be like straight heterosexual people, to like do things. And I see no benefits in kind of maybe saying that being queer is the way to subvert power, because
Yeah, that's true.
if I just don't want to care about like I don't really care too much about my appearance in general, right?
Right.
And so like it seems like a weird thing to force on the people, where and this is like a really odd example, but like I knew she was from like not feminist frequency. She was like a feminist. I was a podcast one time, and they were talking about like sexuality, and she said that when she was younger, like when she was a teenager, she was like so wrapped up in like this feminist ideology and stuff like that, and she like, and one of the things that like women have been kind of hidden from is like the female orgasm is like kind of one of those things that's just been like put pushed aside in society. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like it's just been
Yeah,
pushed.
I do.
Yeah, it's like a
Hmm.
really, really weird thing where like research on and science on, or even like talking about it at all, about like just like the female orgasm, and we're like even just like saying that feels weird, because like people be like it's like so mysterious and blah, right?
Yeah, what was
Um,
that meme about like women don't have orgasms?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And there's really like creepy history with it too, where the like literally like it would just be like medical rape or something like that, where like women would come in with hysteria, which hysteria is just like literally like a woman acting crazy for some reason. Like it could have been like mental illness, it could have been nothing, she could have had like a fever or something like that, who knows. And one
Hmm.
of the accepted practices of trying to cure hysteria was to like basically like give her an orgasm, kind of. It was, I don't know, it was a really weird
Right.
practice.
Like an induced orgasm. Yeah,
Yeah, like they
it's
would
really
just,
strange.
yeah,
I've
I
heard
don't
about
know.
this.
And like actually one of the things is like some doctor got like super famous because apparently like the doctors themselves were uncomfortable with just like using their hands, right? And so a
Uh-huh.
doctor, so literally like the first like vibrator or dildo was a doctor made a vibrator so that doctors didn't have to use their hands for this
Yeah.
procedure. No, it's like
It's
super weird, and you're
it's a
like,
big yikes. Yeah.
yeah, no, you're just like, Jesus, like how was the world like this? And then and you're
Yeah,
just,
it's like almost on par with what's that like brain operation that they used to force on women who were hysterical?
I'm not talking about like
Something
lobotomies, are you?
lobotomy. Yeah, it's
Okay,
sort of like kind of. I mean, it's just like ideologically comparable,
yeah,
not necessarily like ethically, but
yeah.
yeah,
We're like, like lobotomy is the word you were looking for, right?
yeah, yeah,
It
yeah,
basically just makes somebody brain dead, I think, at the end of the day.
yeah.
Yeah,
That's what I was looking for.
yeah. They gave that to like a lot of mentally ill people. They just thought it was good. There's a, oh
Yeah,
man,
they lobotomized women too, though. That was like
yeah.
a major like that's why I brought it up.
There was this Behind the Bastards podcast talked about the guy in Colorado or something who surgically put goat testicles inside men's uh, ball sacks, testicles
Uh
or
huh.
whatever. And he performed like tens of thousands of these operations, and he ran for like Senate one time and almost won or something like that. And it's a ridiculous story.
Jesus
But like
Christ.
no, he's the goat testicle doctor, and it's a ridiculous fucking story. And oh, this happened like in the early 1900s. By the way, this happened like in like 19 like 18 like 1890 to like 1920 or something like
Uh
that.
huh.
So like not that long ago.
Oh, good lord.
But yeah, no, it's a crazy ass story. He was apparently incredibly popular. He was a doctor, and he also built the largest like radio tower, like his radio tower is probably the right word, like just like a to broadcast his
Hmm.
talk show. And it was apparently like it was like 10 times more powerful than like the next most powerful, right? And apparently like it was legitimately like one of those things where like if you were near it or something like that, if you were in like the city near it, the radio frequency would be like so strong that you would literally like hear him talking from people's fillings in their teeth. Like that was
Whoa,
like
that's
that's like an
crazy.
actual real thing. But yeah, okay, we got one last thing.
Insane.
Um,
Yeah, I've got to run after this next
yes.
topic, but
Oh, I'm tired.
let's go.
Um, oh God, I don't even know. This is like one of those things where I guess I worry about where actually this doesn't have anything to do with anything. I think. Oh, I know what it is.
That's okay.
It's like I worry about because like people like fought for gay rights, and then like now people are fighting for like trans rights, and like people have been fighting for all these things, and it seems like trying to give fancy schmancy examples or reasons for like gender performativity or something like that seems like a way to like it seems like not getting to like the root of the problem because like I really don't I would like for these things to just have stopped like if like because like more people are accepting of gay people right now than they used to be, right? They're at least more accepting, right? And
Hmm.
so and but like now we just still have the same problem with like trans people. And like maybe we'll have the same problem with like people who come out who are like much more or like whatever. Like I have no idea what the future holds, right? And so it seems like trying to steer things into um into a way that's like total abolishment and like just kind of saying that instead of trying to the other thing, maybe. This is just me repeating myself. I don't know. I'm kind of tired at this point.
That's okay.
All right.
I think I see what you're getting at. Like, I think my sort of like final, maybe like my more well thought out response to that would be like, I don't think the gender performativity we're talking about gender performativity is ever going to be like um a means by which you sort of bring people over, right? This is sort of like a discussion for
Right.
people who have already sort of accepted the underlying assumptions,
Mhm.
which is that like trans people are treated as inferior in society, and they don't, and there really isn't any reason for it, right?
Right. Well, then, if my final thing would be then, I don't know if you actually do or not. Then I would say like, I would, I would say like, uh, if somebody comes in and they're like, oh man, genders, what is this? And you like say like gender expression instead of like gender performativity, like instead of like gender's not gender is expressed because I feel like gender is expressed is like a better just like general term. I don't know.
Hmm. I think they're probably interchangeable. Either one probably requires or merits a certain amount of explanation. Yeah,
For like a random average day guy, would you
just
say?
for a rando. Yeah, if you said gender expression or gender, well, I don't know if gender expression gets to the same root ideas. Just because I mean, just by virtue of it being a different term, you know.
Yeah. Oh, I'm just saying,
Um,
like, I like the term expression better than perform to like someone who does not care about this stuff. Like, for things I've said, like the term perform maybe implies that there should be an audience. It also means that maybe it's kind of like a choice. So they're like, oh, like
I
well,
think there
people who
does
are
have to be an
right.
audience.
What do you mean there doesn't have to be an audience? Well, like no, to performing it does, but like again, I would say like gender is an internal reality. I'd feel like there is some aspect of gender that does not have to be seen as in like a performance.
Yeah, that's true. But
Yeah.
I don't think there's any point to talking about gender if there's no other people to see it. Like if we're talking about gender in a
But
vacuum.
oh no. But like I'm saying, okay, well then I'll ask you, like, do you think like a trans person would still exist, like if there was nobody else around?
I don't think there would be any need for the term trans if there weren't other people. Like I don't know that you would need to qualify your. I mean, I'm not saying that like. Ooh, that's a tough example, but I'm trying to like speak very carefully here because I don't want to say something offensive. Um,
Yeah, so like, I would say, if someone was just grown up in the woods and they had no idea what anything meant, right? They wouldn't like whether they were whatever sex they were, whatever like that, whether they put on a dress or they wore a suit or they wore like pants or
mhm.
something like that, they would have no notions of these things, right? Like at all,
Yeah, so let's say we
right?
have that person and they suddenly enter society. I don't think there's any reason to like call that person trans, regardless of their preferences, just because because society doesn't necessarily hasn't colored their experience thus far.
Right. Okay, so
If
then
you've
like,
spent the first 15 years of your life in the woods by yourself and then you suddenly enter society, there's not really any need to put that person in any sort of bracket,
right.
societal bracket, because like that person has lived outside of society for a really long time. Like the idea, like the term trans is probably like a Western construct. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, the term trans has been around for a long time though, from what I know about it though.
Yeah, just
Um,
insofar as we understand what being
yeah.
trans is. I'm not speaking about like other cultures, like sort of gender fluid
Yeah. I guess
statuses.
my final thing though would be that like I feel like I want to get around ever using the word gender at all and just like say someone's personal identity or their personal expression or their
Yeah, I'm with
taste
you
or
on that
something like that. And so
for sure.
I feel like I should just like never say the word gender unless I'm like specifically referring it to something like that I have to, I suppose. Like the same way with race, where like I don't right, like where like I have to use the term race because like things still happen to people based on that concept, but I don't ever really want to use it in language that often, I suppose.
Yeah,
And
I feel that.
but the same way you can't get rid of gender too, because like people are still very much so grouped and discriminated against or whatever by gender. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I think there's sort of a necessary, like, social component.
Yeah,
That's most of what I'm trying to get to, yeah.
I agree. All right. I'm finished.
Alright. Um, well, yeah, good talk.
Yeah,
Um,
I enjoyed talking. I feel
yeah,
like
as we've been discussing this stuff, I've been thinking that, maybe we should talk about this off stream more, but but, maybe